All right, it's 1 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order for Tuesday, March 19th. I'm just trying to log into the Zoom, but it's Councillor Jolly. I assume she's on. Okay, so we have, everyone is in attendance. I need an adoption of the agenda. So why can't I see here on the side? Okay, Mackay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, that the March 19th, 2024 agenda be adopted as presented.
I will call for the vote. That passes unanimously. Right, next, we have no registered presenters, correct, Cheryl? I checked.
That is correct.
We're good, okay. So no business arising from that, so I need a motion for consent, which is really just a motion for 6.1, because that's the only thing. So who wants to make that one? Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadhead.
I move that the recommendations in the following agenda report to be approved. 6.1, regular council meeting minutes of March the 5th, 2024.
Call for the vote. That passes unanimously. So the minutes from March 5th were just approved on consent. So we have a public hearing at 2. So I'm going to skip over 7.1 and go just 8.1. We have the Government of Alberta budget analysis presented by Monty Kilo, and he's here. So I'll turn it over to you. Monty, go ahead.
Actually, Mayor Heron, just before Mr. Kilo gets
sorry, Trevor.
started,
Yeah.
just wanted to, and this is a little unconventional, but just given the significance of Ray Gibbon Drive appearing in the provincial budget, reflective of cost increases, I just really wanted to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the staff behind the scenes who have worked over the past year with Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors to make this possible. In addition to council's ongoing advocacy and from an administrative realm, in addition to Mr. Kilo and Ms. Finley, a tremendous effort and support was provided by Atul Saini, Carson Zwires, Dean Schick, and David LaFleur, so that 2 weeks ago, a $31 million line item appeared in the province's budget, which will allow the city to maintain progress on this critical project, improving the lives and livelihoods of St. Albertans and Albertans alike. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Kilo.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council.
Yeah, just to, before you go, Monty, when I was interviewed after the budget, I did speak very highly of Ray Gibbon, and it didn't hit the paper. So when I saw Minister Nally, I made sure he heard that we were very appreciative. So I appreciate you highlighting that. So sorry, Monty, I just wanted everyone to know. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, council. I'm pleased to co-present this report today with Suzanne Finley, Manager of Financial Services. As noted in the background report, federalism and fiscal tools in Canada require partnership and collaboration across all orders of government to deliver needed and desired services to Canadians. As residents and businesses live and operate in cities, towns, and rural communities, municipal governments are in the position of having to directly provide or support most public services and infrastructure. At the same time, municipalities rely on property taxes, grants or government transfers, and user fees or charges for revenues to deliver these services. While municipalities are responsible for 60% of all public infrastructure, they only receive approximately 8 cents of every tax dollar generated by all orders of government. The types of programs and level of financial support from other orders of government varies from budget to budget and can impact municipal sustainability of service and infrastructure provision. As council is aware, the Government of Alberta tabled their 2024 to 2027 budget on February 29th, which is expected to be approved in legislature later this month. The following report will highlight some impacts specific to the City of St. Albert stemming from the provincial budget. So the main areas to discuss include Ray Gibbon Drive as a line item in the budget, Arrow Utilities infrastructure upgrades. There were also several announcements included in the budget where we are awaiting further details as to the exact impact or opportunity they will provide to the city. And while there were several positive aspects in this budget for the city of St. Albert, there remains the longer term impact of reduced capital infrastructure funding and a growing municipal infrastructure deficit across Alberta. Leading up to the budget, council and administration engaged with relevant provincial ministries and advocacy partners to promote the city's interests. This work helped to contribute to the province growing the local government fiscal framework, or LGFF, at a 1-to-1 ratio, consistent with council's 2022 Alberta Municipalities Resolution, which asked for this. Ray Gibbon Drive appears as a line item in this budget, with the first installment of funding anticipated for next year in the amount of $25 million for phase 3 of the twinning project. We will speak more about Ray Gibbon Drive momentarily. Arrow Utilities was successful in their request of the province to fund their infrastructure upgrades in the amount of $50 million over the next 3 years. The provincial budget includes $31 million for Ray Gibbon Drive over the next 3 years. The total provincial contribution is expected to be $35 million, with the remaining $4 million to be allocated in year 4 of the provincial budget. This amount represents an approximate increase of $8 million to fund the project when compared with funding that was previously announced in last year's provincial budget. This increase in funding is due to the city identifying a cost increase to the Ray Gibbon Drive project in 2023 related to various factors, including increased labor and material cost projections, as well as variances in the final cost of the project completed to date, compared with what was originally estimated when the city signed a cost-sharing agreement with the province in 2019. Throughout 2023 and early 2024, the city and the province discussed this cost increase, which culminated with the province contributing an additional $8 million as part of budget 2024-25. Aligned with the 50-50 cost-sharing agreement for Ray Gibbon, the city will also need to fund an additional $8 million for the project than what was originally projected in 2019, although a portion of this increase has already been allocated to address the cost variances experienced as the city funded the first 2 phases of this 4-phase project. This will be reflected in future project charter updates for Ray Gibbon Drive for a total amount of $70 million, with the city and province both contributing 50% towards this total. No amendment is required to the existing borrowing bylaw at this time. Although Arrow Utilities wastewater treatment plant upgrade is not an identified advocacy priority of council with active engagement by city administration, council did write a letter of support to the province in early 2024 regarding their $50 million ask as part of this budget. With the province contributing $50 million over the next 3 years, this means that rate increases will be partially offset by this provincial investment towards the total anticipated project cost of $166 million, a figure according to the most recent information available. Some of the announcements included in budget 2024-25 will require additional details or discussions in the future to better understand their direct impact or opportunity for the city of St. Albert. One example is affordable housing, as the province's 3-year capital plan allocates $717 million in capital grants, $254 million of which is new funding intended to build approximately 3,300 new affordable housing units. Further, $75 million is allocated for the Affordable Housing Partnership Program over the next 3 years, for which Homeland Housing has submitted an application for the 22 St. Thomas Street project. Another example, which Mid-sized City Mayors Caucus advocated for, is the establishment of a local growth and sustainability grant. While exact specifics of this program have yet to be announced, Minister McIver has shared the intent is to relieve some of the pressures facing fast-growing communities and to address acute infrastructure priorities and economic development opportunities. The program is funded at $20 million per year over the next 3 years. Subject to details, this may present opportunities for the city of St. Albert. Budget 2024-25 also provides $10 million per year for the Community Recreation Center Infrastructure Program. This is less than the $80 million over 4 years that was previously committed to through the mandate letter for the Minister of Tourism and Sport. The intent of this program is to support the development or renewal of small or mid-sized projects such as indoor hockey arenas and rinks, pools, and other recreational facilities. This may present some future opportunities for the City of St. Albert should municipalities be eligible for this program. The Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board currently receives a $1 million operating grant from the provincial government each year and had requested that this be increased to $2 million. They have received notification they will not be receiving the additional $1 million as requested. Currently, the board's budget is forecasting a $22,000 deficit in 2025-26, which then increases to nearly $1 million in 2026-27. Subject to future board deliberations, the city's annual requisition could be affected unless additional revenues are received from elsewhere or the board reduces costs and services. Finally, while no announcements have been made regarding a portion of the education property tax being used for municipal revenues in the future, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs business plan does include an objective to, quote, determine the feasibility of amending the education property tax to assist municipalities with retaining more funding for local priorities, end quote. Suzanne Finley will now provide more details on longer-term impacts from the provincial budget.
Thank you, Monty. So as Council is aware, the Local Government Fiscal Framework, or LGFF, which replaces the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, or MSI, is about 48% less on an annual basis than historic spending. While Council's 2022 Alberta Municipalities Resolution called on the province to grow the LGFF at a 1-to-1 ratio, which it will now do, the second component of the resolution, increasing the funding envelope, is not met. Alberta municipalities had called for the LGFF to be funded at $1.75 billion, but instead it's at $722 million. Alberta municipalities has shown the decrease in municipal infrastructure funding on the chart on the screen, and noted that in 2011, the province was investing $420 per Albertan into municipal infrastructure programs. In 2024, this has decreased to $186 per capita. The visual on screen compares previous MSI allocation amounts to what will be received from the Government of Alberta over the next 2 years. This is an increase from 222-223 and 223-224, but again, it's nearly 40% less than historical allotments. What this chart does not include is the funding the city will receive from the province for Ray Given Drive, which is substantive. St. Albert is one of the only municipalities in Alberta to have a line item project in the provincial budget, for which is again commendable to Council for working with the provincial government, particularly the Ministry of Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors, to achieve this partnership. Moving forward, the decreased capital funding offered through the LGFF program will impact the city's ability to fund capital infrastructure projects, which could mean deferral of projects, increased use of reserves, and/or increased financial requirements of local ratepayers. While the province did increase MSI operating funding in 23-24, and this increase is retained under LGFF operating funding, the province's budget did not restore operational funding or revenue streams associated with the province keeping a greater share of fine revenue, paying less for provincial properties located within the city of St. Albert, and billing municipalities for DNA biological caseworks. Combined, this amounts to approximately $700,000 in reduced annual revenue. In constructing future budgets and establishing future priorities, additional considerations to keep pace with inflation, growth, and infrastructure and service demands, such as building differently, diversifying the city's revenue streams, service reductions, or tax increases will need to occur.
So in summary, budget 2024 includes major positives such as the inclusion of funding for Ray-Gibbon Drive, Arrow Utilities, and growing the local government fiscal framework at a 1-to-1 ratio. What this means is that progress on major regional infrastructure upgrades can occur without St. Albert taxpayers paying 100% of the cost. From a challenges perspective, reduced capital funding to municipalities overall and sustained operational funding cuts contribute to a growing infrastructure deficit and will require future decisions around the use of debt financing, as well as the potential for future service reductions, higher municipal taxes, and/or diversifying the tax base and growing in a more revenue positive development pattern. From a future opportunities perspective, Ministry business plans indicate there may be opportunities for more adequate revenue streams and potential for St. Albert projects to access funding through increased funding to affordable housing, the creation of the Local Growth and Sustainability Grant, and the potential for education property tax reform. With that, Madam Mayor, our presentation is concluded and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Let's see here. I have Councillor Mackay first up with questions. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks for the report, Monty. I appreciate it. And thanks for all the hard work identified, Trevor, by your staff and Mr. Fletcher as well. I guess the question, I just need you to help me understand the education property tax and unpack that a little bit. So, I mean, you identify in your background or report and in your presentation that the province expects to collect an additional $220 million in education property taxes. This is a 9.2% increase compared to 2023, and that's entirely due to the assessment tax base growing. So what does that look like for St. Albert? Do we know yet? And how does that impact potentially our taxes next year?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Mackay. I believe that Stephen Bannerman, who is our Senior Manager of Assessment and Tax, is on the thing and might be available to answer any questions on that.
Thank you, Suzanne. The education requisitions, first of all, is something the city of St. Albert is not in control. Certainly, this provides funding for grades 1 through 12 in the province of Alberta. So what we do is with budget, we receive the requisition. It's a little different for non-res than it is for residential. And that's all based on the assessment base and how it's changed, versus the overall province. So in St. Albert's case, the average was 9.2%, but ours is actually on the residential side only went up 5.7%. On the non-residential side, it only went up by 1%. So those will be changes that council will be discussing in the spring when we talk about those tax splits and I come before you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. You must have anticipated that potential question coming, and I appreciate it. I mean, I don't even know how we're gonna even look at addressing that. I don't know whether we can maybe have a discussion when it's appropriate. And I just make it open for comment, is that this is something that I don't even know how we're going to start to identify the actual requisition in relation to the education portion of our income tax, or I mean of our property tax. I don't know. Anyways.
But we do separate it on
Do we?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to put it in bold.
I always wanted to have the municipal one on one piece of paper with the city logo and the provincial on a different piece of paper with the provincial logo.
Yeah.
Just two pieces of paper is a little bit more expensive, but.
Anyways, thank you for anticipating that question. I appreciate it.
All right, Councillor Broadhead.
Well, I have other questions from that, but I don't know how to ask them. Anyway, the question I did have was around the housing program. So you said $75 million has been announced, and 22 to St. Thomas is our project that's going forward. Do we know enough about the program and the criteria in order to be successful to determine whether or not we're A, fully meeting the criteria, and B, if there's a way we can sweeten it to make sure that we're successful.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. So to be clear again, that was a submission from Homeland Housing. City of St. Albert has been in support, as opposed to being in charge of the submission, just for folks
Right.
online. Certainly, Homeland Housing has done their homework and put together their, I would stand to be corrected by Counselor Jolly, but I think they're cautiously optimistic and hopeful that in the coming weeks, the announcement will be made. In terms of the tools that are available, I guess, to council, on that perspective, it's a little bit late, to be perfectly honest with you, given the state of the submission, to discuss it this year. If the submission were unsuccessful, I think that would absolutely be a discussion next year. Or if the submission's successful, and there are other elements to do to, enable that project, I think those are two separate discussions.
Okay, thank you very much. And getting back to the education property tax, maybe this is how I ask the question. So education property taxes, I believe, equate to 22% of the tax paid by our residents. Does a 5.7% increase of property tax equate to a 5.7% increase overall in the budget of the city of St. Albert? Like, I mean, does it equate straight across that way?
Yeah, I think we'll throw that to Steve Bannerman again, to answer that question, Councillor. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough.
The education rate, correct, is 22% of our total. Well, close enough to 22% of our total. We also have some smaller ones for designated industrial requisitions and Homeland Housing, but essentially that 5.7% increase will come off the residential side. So I believe our 5.5 municipal budget would be a portion of that. So offsetting, you'd be looking at something close 5.5 to 6, depending on the assessment base. And we haven't done those numbers yet. Certainly we'd be looking at that in April. The overall requisition to the city was 4.7. So it's a little bit lower, and it's due to the non-res being somewhat more conservative. Other municipalities within the province have received a much higher. So the average was 9.2%, but other municipalities within the province have received a much higher one if they've had larger assessment growth or larger market value movement versus other municipalities. So yes, essentially we'll be looking at the 5.5 we budgeted for and what the 22% of the 5.7 would equate to overall for an increase. We'll also have to consider Homeland and designated industrial requisitions.
Well, it'll be interesting come budget time.
We'll find
For
out
sure.
soon enough. Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. Great news on Ray Gibbon Drive, that we've got the funding. And so just a question on timing. Will we, I believe we're still in a planning mode for 2024 and wouldn't actually start to see construction until 2025. Is that currently the way we've got things planned out?
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. I noticed Dean Schick just popped up online. I will defer to him. Thank you.
Hey, Dean.
Good afternoon, Councillor. Madam Mayor, through yourself, we're essentially exactly that, planning on construction with the approved noted funding. Construction is start on phase 3 in 2025. It's anticipated to be a 3-year construction period for 2025 to 2027 inclusive. And then phase 4 starting up with 2028, 2029.
And thanks for coming online, Dean. Thank you. And the rail crossing is the next big difficult challenge, I guess, in continuing with Ray Gibbon to get it up to Giroux. What's the technical approach? Are we going under, over, level?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Killick. So we had made a request through Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors, as well as Transport Canada, and under the forecasted, so not existing values or volumes of demand for vehicles and the rail line itself. The rail line, even in the forecasted volumes, doesn't meet the necessary warrant for a separated crossing. So in immediate future and moderate at the very least, when we do the widening, it'll be an at-grade crossing similar to what exists today. We have already communicated with CN, who's the rail operator. We're trying to coordinate for construction. This is one of the first aspects that we're looking to have some of the work done at the at-grade crossing in 2025 as some preliminary work. So it's offsite, non-impactful to the existing corridor. And we'll start kind of those discussions as we kind of go through and finalize the designs and whatnot.
Great. And for our partner Rohit and our residents that live in Shiro, timing of getting their road access up to municipal standards when we do the Giroux intersection, that'll coincide with what kind of timing?
I would say the surface work so the pavement work and the curbing and whatnot would be at the latter part of the construction, would be 2027. As we go through in 2026 will be the base work, utility work and whatnot, and then the surface work. So possibly 2027. It'd be anticipated 2027, and if the schedule, because we haven't tendered anything, we don't have a formal construction schedule. So I'm saying this under an estimate and whatnot, but yeah, I would say at maybe late 2026, but likely 2027 for that section as you're west of Ray Gibbon Drive.
Thank you for that clarity. I guess it's a schedule that comes up every time we meet with Rohit and residents. So I guess it's not the answer I was hoping for magically, but if that is the answer, at least we can be clear with residents and kind of manage people's expectations. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. So it says that the library funding was increased by 200,000. So I'm not actually asking you, I'm going to look to you, Mr. Fletcher. So we approved a certain amount for the library based on the current expected amount that they were receiving in funding. So is the intention, I'm just going to double check again, because I asked this for other things previous weeks. Are we planning to change the budget amount for the taxes and reducing by 200,000 by this year? Because we allocated whatever it was, 4.7 million. If they're getting 200,000, could we potentially then, do we need a motion because we actually need a motion to give them money? Or what would be that on there? Because basically, or are we just going to say they have $200,000 more?
Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
In the report, when it mentioned a $200,000 increase, that is for the entire provincial budget for library funding.
I see.
Not specific to St. Albert. So
they're going to get like $4 is what you're telling me.
Politely, yes.
Yeah, and we don't know what that exact amount will be, but I would offer that it's so small as to probably not be worth expending the effort. Yeah.
Okay. But it says 33.6 million has been budgeted for public library grants, an increase of 200,000. Okay, just an increase of 200,000. After I read all the words, it makes more sense. It's just a little bit more disappointing. Okay, it sounds bigger than what it is. The other question, and I just want to confirm this. So what we basically have is we have a 5.7% increase on the education side of taxes. And all the other measures that you mentioned, I think that we've already expected or budgeted for them for 2023. Is that correct? So basically we were prepared as much as possible for the outcome of the provincial budget, and their budget will not affect our tax rate as far as the municipal rate goes. That's all I think we need to check. Thank you.
Did we have the right number for LGFF in the budget?
We were. There was a notification that came out. So with our capital funding, we have adjusted for that. So, yeah.
Sorry, I remember that letter now.
Yeah, and if I could just maybe chime in on that. So yeah, council's probably can recall that the province announced their allocation formula for the LGFF, I think November, December.
Yeah.
It sort of the way that it rolled out, it was less than what we
I was
we're still
panicking. I
seeing
thought you
that
guys were overestimating and but I remember the letter now. Sorry. Councilor McKay, another question.
I'll be quick though. I'm just looking, I know it was identified in your presentation, Monty, around potentially future opportunities, and I know it's in the background or as well, and just getting hung up on the education tax. So I mean, can you remember, and maybe Madam Mayor, you can from your time on Alberta municipalities, were there any resolutions around the education property tax? And if not, is there an opportunity, or have we missed that resolution date? Because I mean, it is identified in the background, or that in the municipal affairs business plan, it does contain some words around maybe determining the feasibility of amending the education property tax that would allow, assist municipalities with retaining more funding for local priorities out of that. I'm just trying to remember if we had anything from Alberta Muni's resolutions, or if there's a chance potentially maybe to take an advocacy role in that.
Maybe I'll take the initial kick at this, Councillor McKay, to just off the top of the head here, I don't believe there's any active
I
resolutions.
think there was one and it's
uh,
expired. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, there might be an opportunity to provide that. I think too, for council members that attended the Municipal Leaders Caucus last week, there's probably some emerging opportunities from a mid-sized city's perspective in terms of what that looks like, aligned with sort of the Premier's comments about sort of making sure that it's equitable in terms of what is coming out from municipalities is invested into municipalities.
I know when she was running for the leader, she had identified potentially using the education assessment as either to supplement or in place of funding for municipalities.
In place of, I think.
Yeah. And so I don't know, it doesn't look like that's there yet, but potentially there's an opportunity. I don't know if this is mid-sized mayors or if this
So,
is something from Alberta.
After the Premier's speech on Friday, I met with some of the mayors. I think I sent you guys, maybe I didn't copy you. Bill knows what I'm talking about. So we met and talked about two things, because the Premier had mentioned that political parties existed in the mid-size, probably existed in the mid-sized cities. So the mid-sized mayors will write a letter saying unequivocally they don't exist at our level of government. And the other part was she spoke a lot. For those of you who weren't there, she talked about 3.3 billion, has about 3.3, over 3, how about we say that, $1 billion that she's calculated that's being invested in municipalities in Alberta. And so that would be LGFF at 722 plus the $60 million grant, plus some of the one-offs she mentioned, 800,000 approximately for Edmonton LRT, 800 approximately for Calgary LRT, probably includes the $50 million grant for Arrow, includes Ray Gibbon, probably $18 million for the Windspear. Maybe it even includes the arena down in Calgary. I'm not even sure, probably. So anyways, what I want, Bill's already started, is just collecting a bit of data from the mid-sized cities to say what did come to municipalities. I think actually St. Albert's quite lucky because we got the 31 million for Ray Gibbon. But the letter might say something along the lines that of that 3-ish billion that she's talking about, very little of it came to the mid-sized cities. And if she was going to explore letting us keep the education property taxes, we would be in support of that. So yeah, there's a little bit of advocacy happening at the mid-sized cities level, but if you wanted to work with Trevor and Monty on a resolution that says essentially to Minister McIver, do what the Premier told you to do, because it's in his mandate letter, to explore that option, I think that would be a good resolution.
Yeah, just maybe a takeaway or something. I don't know what form you needed, or if you're satisfied with right now. Is this enough information, or do you need an information request or a?
No, I think that's enough information for us to go away and discuss it and come up with an option. Yeah, thank you.
I think it's just a quick phone call to Rachel DeVos at AB Muni. She might already know if there's one in the hopper on that, and if not, she can help figure out what it should say. All right. Mike, you have another question? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. With the provincial education tax collection, we've just mentioned you know, we talk in kind of percentage numbers, but in real numbers, the amount the provincial government collects goes from roughly $2.5 billion up to $2.7 billion. I think I know it just, when you talk real numbers, I think it really highlights how significant this is. It impacts everybody. I understand it at a municipal level and individual taxpayer level, but the real numbers are what is more impactful. My question is in the provincial budget, did they indicate any assignment of how that money is, like, did they identify new schools or anything that they were specifically had earmarked? Because we always hear the challenge of shovel-ready sites for school investment, and you know, we need more teachers, et cetera, et cetera. In the budget, did they, or in the minister mandate letters, did they actually say how that money is going to be spent? I just general question.
Yeah, and I'll defer some of the specifics to Mr. Kelo, but yes, they did, right? Obviously, there's the operational funding that flows out of that, which is a given. They did identify some specific schools across the province or specific projects for investment in education as well.
Councillor Killick, they did identify, I want to take a stab at about 24 schools at various stages of funding, from just design to full-on construction. However, the exact funding details are a bit murky, and there's no established link between the education property tax that's collected and the associated funding for these schools.
And is that online, that list of schools and projects?
Yes, it was released as a press release, and that's something we can certainly forward for your attention.
Yeah, if you could, I'd appreciate that too. I'm sure the rest of council, as we meet with our continued education partners in St. Albert, they'd probably be interested to have that as background. Thank you.
Councillor Bermansky.
Thank you. Just one question for Monty again. Sorry, there was, I think in the budget, they mentioned 8 schools that they would be building with those funds. Do you remember anything about the 8 school mention or details?
Councillor Bermansky, I don't off the top of my head. However, a brief scan, my memory tells me there was none in St. Albert.
Okay. No, not in St. Albert. Yeah, I know that. But okay, I'll research that as well. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Jolly, you're good? All right, I see no more questions here. Does anyone want to make a motion? Councillor Hughes, go ahead.
Let me just scroll up. I was reading the background a second time. At the agenda report dated March 19th entitled Government of Alberta 2024 Budget Analysis be received as information.
Awesome. Any opening comments?
Yeah, I really want to thank you guys for going through all this. It's a lot of material to dissect and try to break down for everybody. And I think it's a very clear report at the end of the day. It's just disappointing, quite frankly, that the province will not exist if people do not live in municipalities. And they expect to have certain provisions given to them in municipalities to be able to enjoy living in Alberta. And unfortunately, while I appreciate the fact that it didn't cause massive decreases to our budget operationally or capital wise, that I really would love to see a greater investment in recognizing that the provincial money that they do collect needs to also be given for higher levels for infrastructure at the municipal level. And that those hits that we took from MSI and others, that they are real as far as our ability to get things done. And when we went and talked to the Premier before the election and explained that, for example, the importance of Lakeview, and we are going into a lot of debt, and it's all for basic infrastructure, not for sexy projects. And it's in part because we're not getting enough funding to be able to do that infrastructure that we require without going into massive debt and putting that tax load in some cases onto residents and certainly onto the offsite levy program, which then of course makes housing more expensive. So I really want to thank you guys for everything you've done. and be able to answer all those questions. But I would love to see that in future budgets, that the province does recognize the importance of that. It's not just giving money to municipalities, it's investing in the people of Alberta when they do so. That's it. Thank you.
All right, anyone else have any comments? Okay, I will call for the vote. Vote is closed and that motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is program and service review update of the policy. We have 20 minutes before public hearing, so I think we can at least start this. And then
It will take us 2 minutes or less to do a quick change of staff.
Yep.
Where we play the musical chairs music and who gets the lucky hot seat, Daria?
the hot seat. Perfect. All right, Daria, go ahead whenever you're ready.
So good afternoon, members of council. Today, we're bringing forward program and service review policy that has been updated, but also because we have not presented this to council in a while, we have a couple of slides just to share with you what has taken place since this policy was established. So I'll provide a bit of a background, share a few successes to date, and then summary of policy, and then finish with recommendation for council. So as you know, the policy is part of our strategic framework, specifically focusing on giving that governance level direction to ensure that we are continuously reviewing programs and services so that they're meeting needs of the community, as well as to improve efficiencies and effectiveness of programs and services that we deliver. The strategic framework policy was updated earlier in the council's term, and this was the last policy that we are bringing forward. That's part of that strategic framework. It was delayed just to allow us enough time to align it with the updated internal audit steering committee bylaw for synergies and to ensure that we're avoiding any potential duplications. So at the time that this policy was introduced, there were a number of different opportunities that were coming from administration as well as from council. So a council desire for administration to formally demonstrate commitment to continuous improvement of programs and services, as well as opportunity for council to provide input and direction related to review of programs and services. Also, we're looking at providing a structured approach that considers resources and budget, both to conduct program and service reviews, as well as for implementation of recommendations that are coming from those reviews. We also had opportunity to improve and ensure evidence-based decision-making with proper analysis for any recommendations that were coming forward and impacts of those recommendations. And at the same time, we were introducing service and service level inventory, which created opportunity to optimize, make services more visible, and then identify opportunities to optimize our services. And then, of course, service level inventory is used to develop multi-year plan for program and service reviews. So that led to establishment of this policy as well as administrative directive. And in 2018, 2022, we had a project in the corporate business plan to help us establish the standardized approach and to build organizational capacity for continuous improvement and program process improvement in particular. So just to share a couple of successes to date, we have established centrally led and managed practice with consistent governance, stakeholder involvement for a broader perspective. There are internally led reviews, and then we also have a standard approach for reviews that are done by third party, all to ensure consistent approach across the organization and right stakeholders involvement. This is in addition to many initiatives that are taken on by departments that may not be highlighted through this policy. We also have standard framework in place that's based on complexity of the project, tools and resources that were developed. We have introduced lean methodology for process improvement and provided, quite a few initiatives to help build capacity across the organization. Lean methodology training has been provided a number of times with about 50 people trained to date, and we will continue to do that in the future. And then, we provide advice and support to departments as they take on process improvement in particular. And overall, all of our departments do an amazing job looking for opportunity for process improvement, but doing this work also helped enhance that awareness and provide tools and resources that departments can use. Since the policy was introduced, we had a number of different internally conducted reviews, and they range from, process improvement, process documentation to increase awareness, identifying any opportunities for cost savings or efficiencies. And we use PBB Insights to help us identify some of these opportunities. Since in the last couple of years, our focus shifted more to implement recommendations that came from the operational and fiscal review. So as council is aware, some of those were done by external parties. So our focus has been on, managing, coordinating those reviews with the departments and consultants hired to help us conduct those reviews. There are a number of, opportunities that are still in progress as we introduce new practices and processes. We're looking at integrating some of, the three in particular, into our process for program and service reviews. And those are in particular performance measurement, integrated risk management, and the corporate risk register. And we will continue to incorporate what's called PBB Insights, so opportunities identified through that process to plan for program service reviews or any other opportunities that were identified to be explored. Since the policy was introduced, we've also matured internal audit steering committee, and that's practice by establishing risk-based internal audit practice with that committee. And we will continue to mature the practice and process established and continue alignment with this policy to make sure that we continue with synergies. And then the last one is really working on enhanced communication, both to council and the community. We do great work across the organization, but we can look for increased opportunities to share some of our successes, both with council and community, and not only for projects that may come under this policy and through multi-year plan, but also look for the opportunities to share great work that each and every department is doing on a regular basis to ensure efficient operation. So summary of policy updates, some wording changes for clarity, updates to definitions for consistency across related policies. We clarified roles and responsibilities related to plans, reviews, and implementation of recommendations, clarity for when and how council can provide direction for program and service level reviews to better align with planning, prioritization, and budgeting cycle. More clarity for budget and resource requirements for planned reviews and implementation of recommendations when requirements exceed existing resources and budget. And lastly, information sharing with the internal audit steering committee for synergies and to avoid duplication. So with that, the recommendation is that the updated policy as attached to 19th report is approved. Be happy to take any questions that council may have.
Awesome. Thank you, Daria. Any questions? Sorry, just real quick, the motion says updated, approve the updated. It's really just an amendment, isn't it, to the old policy? It's not a brand, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Because although it seems that because there's so much red lines, but okay, I've got a few questions. Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Daria. Madam Mayor, through you to administration. A lot of you highlighted on some of the good cost savings, efficiencies, capacity building. Do we actually have any measures of kind of FTE through this process that said, we improved the process, it resulted in this level of efficiency? In a static environment, we would have saved 1 FTE. But as the city grows, it allowed that one FTE to do the new capacity. Do we have any actual numbers of, because this has been a lot of work by a lot of people, and I appreciate that, but it's always good to be able to actually quantify that. So I just wondered if that was part of, I know you've made those statements in the presentation, but I wonder if there's actually any quantifiable numbers that are that you've seen over all the work.
Thank you for your question. It is definitely something that we continue to evolve. I can share one example that's top of mind for me. When we did a council agenda report process review, we actually did automate quite a bit, and we were able to reallocate one full FTE into a different area rather than supporting what was previously very manual process. So that's the one that is top of mind for me that I can share with you. But because over the last couple of years, our focus has been on advancing a lot of the operational and fiscal review recommendations, we need more time to implement a lot of those recommendations to see what benefits are truly realized. So sometimes it takes time. If it's not immediate, which in most cases from the operational fiscal review has not been, we need more time to monitor and look at the difference and improvements made.
But if I could, Councillor, your point is well taken, right? And it's sort of the metrics by which we measure improvement, but also the mechanism by which we communicate it in terms that are easily understood, right? I mean, the complexity of the system sometimes defies that, but in those cases where we can put a dollar figure on it or a time figure, right, that's obviously very useful. And that is, as Daria has mentioned, something we're working towards. Yeah.
And anything to streamline agenda packages for council is a good
That's
thing.
the big one.
Whether there's savings or not, it's a good thing. Just a totally different question. On page 63, I think, of our agenda package, it talks about the change in where council can have input to just find the provide prove external service and service levels by resolution. So what does that act? Because we're talking about these specific changes as to where council can have input, and it concerns me, I guess, that it says we're changing identify priorities in bullet number A on page 63 to provide input. And I thought council's role was a stronger role to provide guidance on and prioritization of service levels. This wording says provide input. Input sounds like, well, doesn't sound like it has any teeth, I guess. Let me put it that way.
Thank you for your question. And I think, so this policy is for program and service reviews. So the edit was meant to clarify council role in providing input and helping us identify potential reviews of programs and services, where once we go into service and service level inventory and potentially making adjustments to services that city delivers or service levels to community, that's where the reference to council motion comes in. So as you know, for us to change what we have in service and service level inventory, significant changes, it would come with the council motion and council debating and making decision and providing direction to administration. This particular edit is for identifying opportunities using service and service level inventory for any program and service reviews as we develop a multi-year work plan that this policy is directing administration to do.
But I think maybe if I could, so again, I think that distinction is important, right? Council owns the service levels at the end of the day. And you will tell us we will figure out how do we do it to the best of our ability based on the prioritization and the allocations that council's provided. So that piece very clear. I think in this instance, again, it's about the reviews, input into the review. I would also offer, I mean, this council can tell us to do it at any time with a majority vote, right? So a notice of motion supported by 4 councillors, and we will review whatever you tell us to review. But I think in terms of the more deliberate annual rhythm, that's really what this is trying to flesh out.
I understand the idea around the separation of between the operational internal or internal staff reviews. The part I'm really struggling with of saying the external customer facing, and I specifically use the language external because that's in the policy framework here. It seems that we've taken away and diluted the accountability for council. So I'm really struggling with that, but I'll maybe listen to some of my other councillors and see if they share that concern.
All right. Councillor Mackay, and then Councillor Jolly, and then Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm looking at the time too, so I realize that at 2 we have a public hearing. I guess my question was going to be similar to what we just heard from Councillor Killick, because we've added C in there, and with C is provide support and funding for implementation of council approved reviews and subsequent recommendations through the budget process. So I was trying to wait and hear what I heard from the response to A around providing input, and I just didn't see the synergy between the two because they're almost in opposition of each other, in the sense that if council was to identify the priority and for the review, then we're responsible also for providing the support and funding for the implementation of. But if we're only providing input for external programs, then then C is I guess necessary if we're only providing input. But if we identify the priorities, it's sort of like C is just kind of, well, if we're going to identify that as a priority, well, then we have to provide the support and funding as well. So I was just trying to figure out how those two worked, or whether they were not an opposition, but because you had to add C because instead of priorities, you changed it to providing input, or am I missing am I missing something?
I'll take an initial stab at it, and then Daria, you can go ahead. Because I think there's sort of 2 mechanisms there, right? And so council can approve a review without approving the requisite resources to implement the results of the review. We obviously prefer that both those things happen at the same time. We do the review, and then there's resources available to implement the results. That's the ideal, but those 2 things can be separate and distinct. And there will be times when council directs us to conduct a review, and times when we do conduct reviews that we then come and make the pitch, I guess, simplistically. And I think there is a differentiation there. Go ahead, Daria.
I think it aligns that the intent is just to make sure that if we are directed to conduct review and we don't have resources to do it, or resources to implement recommendations, that there is a point in the policy that we can, have that support from council. So recently we had a motion from council, but it came with funding because council recognized that we wouldn't have resources to conduct analysis that were required. So the point is there just to recognize that learning that we've had since this policy was first introduced, which is that sometimes we can do some of these reviews with internal resources, sometimes even find a budget, an existing budget, but often we do require budget, sometimes even additional resources to conduct a review and or implement recommendations that are coming from that review. So that's the intent of addition to this policy with.
Yeah, and I understand that sitting on the internal audit steering committee, I realize that if there's a priority identified, but there's not the capacity within the organization to do it, then there's two things happen. One of them something has to give, right?
Mhm.
So, but I mean, then the way that if we provide before, when policy had identified priorities for the review of external programs, that identified something to me that there was a process for our external program. Right now, providing input for review of external programs, that implies to me that who's bringing those requests for reviews of external programs? Is that an internal matter that administration now is doing? Or is that, I mean, like Mr. Fletcher said, we can always do that through motion as to identifying things. But I mean, if it's in policy, the identification of priorities should remain the function of council. But if we're providing input for review of external programs, that implies to me that you guys are bringing me the external programs that you've identified we need to review, and we're just providing input. Follow?
Yes.
So both those things can happen. I would submit there will be occasions when we come forward and say we believe that there's a need to look at this and we're going to ask for the resources to do it. That's incumbent upon us to make the pitch. I would submit that I think as we look at the service standards expectations, subparagraph A talks about by resolution, you can initiate a program service review, internal or external or any type that you want. And so the overarching imperatives that are represented by this council are clearly stated there at the end of the day. I think it's council that will partly drive this, but I think it would be we would be remiss if we didn't have a mechanism to come and recommend some of those things as well. So I believe there's sort of a bottom up and a top down process that can inform this. If the and then, you know, as I think as we look at the subparagraph, I think it's D, where we talk about council's input into reviews requiring approval of. If that language is problematic, we can certainly go ahead and look at, but I think there's a difference between directing it and then having input into how it's conducted. And those are two distinctions.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe it's just out of sequence for me. It might be just something as easy as that, changing the sequence of it. So that D becomes A, you know, that type of a thing. And then just the last question, Madam Mayor, and I realize the time. Is this reviewable every 7 years? Because no, or you've got 2028 review, next review date is 2028 financial and strategic services. Is that what it is? Like 4 year? I guess it wouldn't be. It was 7 years, 6 years from, I'm looking at 2021. We reviewed it now. What's the next review date?
Yeah, so typically it's every 4 years. The reason that this one was delayed is because we were working on the internal audit steering committee bylaw, and we wanted to wait for that to be done to align to policies and potentially avoid duplication. So that's the reason that it was delayed this time. But after today, it's going to be every 4 years.
Fair enough. It was just a question. I just noticed 2028 and just wanted, and fair enough. Okay, thanks.
Okay, we are gonna have to call a pause because it is 2:00. We have a public hearing, although there's no registered speaker, so I wasn't really too concerned, but I will just go to agenda item, I think it's 7.1, which is on page 13 of our package. Right. I open the public hearing on bylaw 8, 2024, which is an amendment to the Clean Energy Improvement Tax bylaw. And while Megan's making her way to this seat, sorry, Dory, we'll have to call you back in a sec. Do you want to, you can sit wherever you want, Megan. We're all good? Okay. So as with all public hearings, we will get a presentation from our administration. We have the manager of environment. Is that your title, manager of environment, Megan? Yeah. And of course, we have Trevor from Environment, Government, Indigenous Affairs to talk to us. Then we will open up to questions. I have no registered speakers, although I do see somebody in the gallery. Are you here to speak to the public hearing? No. Okay. So we have no one in the gallery for the public hearing. This one should be pretty quick, so I'll let you take it over, Megan.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. Today I'm here to propose an amendment to the Section 11 of the Clean Energy Improvement Program tax bylaw. The proposed change would state the maximum amount of funding to be allocated to the Clean Energy Improvement Program for the entire four years of the program versus annual allocation. Since the program was launched in November of 2023, maximum annual funding has been reached and the program has been put on hold and interested participants are waitlisted. The program has experienced a continuous waitlist from November 2022 to July of 2023. Amending the bylaw will allow the program to continue without disruption. Thank you.
One question I had real quick is it talked about on page 15 under risks. It said Alberta municipalities has implemented a series of mitigation strategies. So if we get oversubscribed, they would limit the number of application spots in a predetermined timeframe. And you aren't introducing, I don't even see Marta, but you're not you think that might be a later amendment? Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, like if we can't handle the uptake or the demand, that would be an opportunity for us to look at that. But at this time, we're not thinking of implementing anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason I asked is this is such a ridiculous process that we have to have a public hearing anytime we amend this bylaw. Like, should we just get it all done now? But you think we're good? Or would that put too many restrictions on applicants if we?
No, like to
Okay.
change the process, we wouldn't need to amend the bylaw. It would just
Okay.
be administrative. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Then I have no questions. Councillor Mackay does so.
Yeah, sorry to be chatty today. Just a question I had in relation to, so we're not changing the actual maximum amount that a applicant can apply for. It's still 50,000, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right, good. And this is not, this is only for residential, right? This is not open for non-residential?
That's correct. We don't have a commercial SEEP yet.
Yeah,
Is that just because we don't have enough money?
This program was based on an opportunity through FCM, which only allowed for residential
Oh,
SEEP.
okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Because I think other municipalities do commercial, right? I think Edmonton does.
Yes, Edmonton does. Yeah.
Good question, Councillor Mackay.
yeah, and I'm, part of it is because our website, when I looked at it to get a little bit more information about my own windows, it does identify on our website that the Clean Energy Improvement Program is a financing program designed to make residential and non-residential energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades more accessible. I realized further in other places, it does, particularly when we get into the terms and conditions, it does identify that it's not for but is that just is it in there just because of FCM's requirement, or is it in, can we change it so there's no confusion?
It
does-
was in there just, I believe that was taken off of the Alberta municipality's website, but yeah, we could change that to take out the non-residential so that there's no
Yeah,
confusion.
I
for
mean,
sure.
you quickly identify it later on when you start going to terms and condition, and it's only available for residential, but when you just go to the front facing page, when you get into the program, it does identify that in the first paragraph. So if that could be a change, that'd be something simple.
Yep, that's no problem.
Okay.
That was it, Councillor Killick.
Thank you for the info. It's pretty straightforward, and I like anything that kind of makes it nice and smooth for residents to apply. Question was, when this was reviewed by EAC, did they have any comments that would be helpful to council?
No, they were pretty supportive of the program. There was nothing that stood out to change anything that we are currently doing with the program.
Okay, great. I just wanted to check, is there a guiding step in our review and input process? So that's good to know. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Just a quick question. So it doesn't talk about what our actual uptake has been. How has the response been on this program?
Currently, we sent out a memo to city councils. So we're at about a total of 65 applications, and we're at about 1.5 million in asks.
In total so
Yeah.
far? So this is so that we can kind of conglomerate all of the money into one and we can use it as we want to. Are we actually at a risk of, at this point, of using up more than 1 year at a time? like, I know this might be proactive, but is it like we're actually like, oh, we actually could be spending over?
Yeah, I mean, it would just mean that we would use the funding that we received or allocated for the program sooner. So it just wouldn't be a stop and a start. We
Yeah.
would just continue on with the program. So what we would do now is we put applicants on a wait list. So now we just can continue with the program. There's not that stop and start.
So it looks like there's a good chance we might run out of the money before the 4 years is out then, is what I'm hearing. If
We
actually don't
might,
spend it.
although, I mean, I think the length of time it takes for applicants to complete projects is a little bit longer than we anticipated. So I think the 4 years is pretty accurate.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's it.
Any more questions? All right. I need a motion to close the public hearing. Councillor Broadhead, thank you.
On my mic here. I move that the public hearing on bylaw 8/2024 be closed.
Thank you for that. Call for the vote. Voting is closed and that passes unanimously. Councillor Broadhead, now that your mic is on, do you want
Carry on, certainly,
Yeah.
Madam Mayor.
to?
That bylaw 8/2024 being an amendment to the Clean Energy Improvement Tax bylaw 26/2021 be read a first time.
All right, any opening comments?
Well, Madam Mayor, it's an efficiency change to this bylaw. I think with this change, the money will flow without starts and stops and stuff like that, and will certainly make it more accessible to our residents. So I think this is a good thing.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I will call for the vote. That motion passes unanimously. Second reading,
That bylaw 8/2024 be read a second time.
call for the vote. Pardon? Okay, Councillor Mackay, go ahead.
That unanimous consent be given for consideration of third reading of bylaw 8/2024.
Perfect. Call for the vote. Voting's closed and that passes unanimously. And then Councillor Broadhead last time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That bylaw 8/2024 be read a third and final time.
Call for the vote. Voting's closed, I think. Yep, passes unanimously. All right, we're done. I like public hearings like that. Do you guys want to have a quick break while Daria comes back and sits in her chair? Pardon? Sounds good. Yeah, and we'll continue on with the service level review policy. It is 2:12. How about 2:25?
Go ahead, Mayor.
All right. Sorry, Natalie. Sorry, Councillor Jolly. We were getting my computer fixed and
We're all good.
in charge of everything was up here for a sec. So we're good. I feel like we were on, you go to next for questions and then Councillor Broadhead, correct? Okay.
Okay,
So
am I good to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm not sure this is who this is to, but so I appreciate this that this process is great at kind of helping us ask how we can deliver services more efficiently and effectively. But how does that work in terms of considering whether we should or should not be doing something or providing a particular service? So I know that council approves or sets the service levels, but is admin through this process going to tell us when those service levels don't make sense anymore?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think again, there's two streams to this, and one would be top down. That is, council's identified something you want us to look at or direct. And yes, to your point, if we've identified something administration that we believe needs to be altered, added, canceled, deleted, and pick your adjective, we would absolutely bring that forward through this process.
Okay.
Daria, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, absolutely what Bill said. I would just add that we would also, depending on what it is and what service, sometimes we would recommend review to take place or just an opportunity for proper analysis of the impact before decision is made to, let's say, stop service or add service. But if administration is bringing forward for service to stop or to introduce a new service, then we would bring forward proper analysis to demonstrate that evidence-based decision-making and recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So from my perspective, the new services, those are coming, like we see those all the time. But it seems like we're hesitant to even consider eliminating a service. Is that just kind of the timing of when I've been considering these things, or am I reading into that wrong?
Yeah, I don't know if hesitant's the right word. I think, flowing from the discussion at the council strategic planning session, right, which defines broadly, we do the quick check through the corporate business plan to ensure that the key major muscle movements, the projects are on track. We also do a quick review of the service levels to ensure that they're aligned. I would say that we're hesitant's not the right word. If something was screaming out loud that it was ripe for a change, we would come forward. We've not seen anything right now that's not working or we don't believe is important from an administrative perspective, and that's why we're not recommending anything during this process.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to phrase this carefully. Continuous improvement in light of program and service reviews. So if in fact there are changing standards, or if there are expectations within the community for a increased service level, how does that kick off a service? How does that play out in terms of a service review, in terms of our service standards within the community?
Maybe I can start and then Bill will jump in. All of our departments, especially those that work directly with community, monitor how programs are used and demand for services. So if they identify that there is an increased need for a particular service, as Bill mentioned, administration would bring it forward. It may come as a separate report to council with recommendations to adjust service, so increase service levels, add new service. Or it can be part of the budget. Often we bring forward budget requests either for operating dollars to help us increase service level because demand is increasing, or sometimes it comes in the form of a business case for an FTE because sometimes we need additional resources to meet demand of a growing city. So it could come depending on what service, but it could come usually through, we try to bring it forward as part of the budget cycle through operating business cases.
Yeah.
Unless there is urgent need, of course.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example that our community went through in the last year is that we had a resident have to raise money to upgrade a local park to fully accessible. Now, our standard is that when we rebuild a park, it's like for like. But there's an expectation perhaps within the community for accessibility, and we actually state accessibility. So how does that play out?
Yeah, I think in that particular instance, from an administrative perspective, we believe our RMR policy in particular, and is like with like. We are taking a look at some environmental perspectives. There's a new idea, which is inclusion, diversity, equity strategy that's going to be put into place that could result in some of those things. I would say in that particular instance, though, if there was a significant desire to wholesale change that, that would ideally come from council to us to direct us to do it because it comes with fairly significant resource implications.
So that would be an example of a council mandated service review and decision then at that point in time. Would that be a good example?
Absolutely, Councillor, yes.
Okay. My second example, and this is so the buzzword in public transportation these days is the electrification of the fleet. And who knows whether we'll actually even be able to buy a clean diesel bus within 3 or 4 years. How does that play out for us? Because there's significant cost associated with that. Do you then indicate to us that this needs to be done, or how does that play?
Again, I think it's a bit of a both ends of the spectrum. So I would say that as we look at our mobility choices planning, those best practices are absolutely part and parcel of it. So both from an emerging technologies perspective, a sustainment perspective holistically, and environmental perspective, I think in particular in this case, without letting the cat out of the bag, I had a discussion this morning on somebody who's very interested in the hydrogenization. I don't know if that's a word, but conversion of fleets to hydrogen, right? And so there's a number of those things that we're looking at. And in the absence of a council directed motion, we would absolutely be coming forward to recommend, based on our analysis, that we think this is at a level of maturity that it makes sense for St. Albert. I mean, honestly, a Calgary or an Edmonton could do things in advance of us just based on size and resources. And so we are absolutely looking for the right time to signal those things to council and make those recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Bermansky.
Thank you through the mayor to administration. Going back to Councillor Killick's comments on success measures, as far as performance, is brought to council. And I do appreciate the organized effort in all you're doing in this project and such, and it's complex. But those success measures, for example, you mentioned, the one full-time job that was saved, but then they were just put somewhere else, right? How would we know those savings? And would that be staffing isn't our purview, but you're asking us for additional staff, but how would we know if one is replaced or where the savings actually exist?
Yeah, Councillor, you're 100% right. I think that's still the evolving, our ability from a performance indicator or results perspective to quantify those in better terms, right? And so I would say over the last number of years, and I stand to be corrected by Daria, we've been focused on the operational fiscal review, right, which has been significant, and trying to get those, you need to get something across the finish line before you can articulate that, what it's saved or the efficiency has been achieved. And that's, I think this year we're primed to get a bunch of things across the finish line. And so working on that narrative. So I guess to the point of your question, it becomes an ongoing I think responsibility on my behalf to paint that picture for you throughout the year of what efficiencies had been achieved. When we look at efficiencies, I would caution that the scope of work right now over the next few years outstrips the ability to do it in year. And so there is a discussion about, you've achieved efficiency somewhere else. We refocus that effort on something else that's very important. Mm-hmm. But I think that can be articulated 100% as we come but it's going to take a few months to get there. I would say through 24 as we start seeing this.
Right. I'd like to celebrate those successes in all fairness, you know.
Absolutely, as would we, 100%. And you know, again, I think it's incumbent upon us to as we get to that level of maturity, to communicate it to council so that you can absolutely do that and put your stamp on it.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's it.
All right, I see no more hands up or questions. So I will turn to a member of council to make a motion. Now, Councilor Mackay, go ahead. Or do you have another question? Oh, and
You have another question?
do you have one?
Sir? Yeah.
Okay, so Councilor Killick does, but okay,
Question.
go ahead, Councilor Killick. Yeah.
I just wondered, based on our discussion on page 63 of the document,
That's what I was gonna.
bullet A, whether administration had maybe contemplated any language changes there?
Thank you for your question. We have. So we do have a new wording that, and Martha will help me here with the motion. So the new wording that we would recommend is annually review the services and service level inventory, provide input and approve as required for the review of external external programs and service levels at a time appropriate for inclusion into the business planning and budgeting process. So basically just adding and approve as required.
I think equally you could use the word direct,
Direct.
if that's more comfortable for you, but ultimately the purview of this council to tell us to do anything at any time is.
Yeah.
And I guess, right, I think, again, going back to the purpose of that, it's in an ideal world, everything is aligned throughout the annual budget planning cycle. The reality is we don't live in an ideal world, so things will come as one-offs through notice of motions and direction from council. But when possible, it's obviously best to try and align it to the budget process, right, from a resourcing perspective.
Can you put that up just where I can see it?
I can share, just give me one
I
second.
mean, I just don't want to wordsmith, but that's.
Oh, Ledge will do it. Perfect.
Do we really need to make this motion?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I agree.
That's okay. You making that or is Councilor Killick?
Well,
If that gets after what you're thinking, if it doesn't, then maybe perhaps need to go back to the drawing board.
so,
Go ahead.
he's still asking questions, so I'll wait.
You're contemplating, Councilor Killick?
I'm
I
gonna.
see the brain or thinking.
I was just going to say thanks for putting it up, but I am still personally concerned that providing input, I think leaves is just not got enough strength to clearly articulate what I believe council's role is, and that's identifying priorities, providing input and approving that standard language. And I guess I'm still struggling that I don't think council's role is to provide input. It's much stronger than that, and it is clearly to identify priorities. We've talked very much about we need to set priorities for administration so that things are focused, and we have limited resources to do things. So I'm still really struggling with and wouldn't be supportive of language that takes out the identifying priorities. I think we're more than providing input on these things.
If I could, your worship, got no
Mhm.
issue with that language going back. That was the original language, I think,
Yep.
the original policy. If you wish to maintain that, there's no concerns from an administrative perspective.
Can Marta, can the motion just read that update or amend the policy except keep the original wording of under responsibilities, council shall, section A, original wording, something like that.
We could do a motion like that. We have one ready to
Oh,
go
okay.
that just says to revert, essentially says to revert back to the original wording in subsection A.
Okay.
What we're saying is delete, provide input and replace it back with identify priorities. Technically,
Yep.
that's what the motion we have ready to go says.
Does that make you good? Happy? Okay. I'm gonna look to you to make that motion then.
That policy C/CAO-15 is be amended to decide to delete the phrase provide input and add the words identify priorities in its place under city council responsibilities in subsection A. Thank you for making it bigger. The magic of IT again.
Okay, Councillor Jolly has a question before I accept that. Go ahead, Councillor Jolly.
Yeah, I just want to confirm with Mr. Fletcher. So this doesn't change anything. It's just kind of language. That's the impression I get. We're still approving service levels and all of that. So I'm just not getting the sense that this changes anything. Is that why admin is okay with the wording?
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, I will accept the motion and I'll let you enter into debate. Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. I said it in our opening comments of when this was changed. And it's not changing it, it's just going back to the original language. So it's changing what was proposed, but it's actually just going back to what has been in place before. And I firmly believe that it is council's responsibility and one of our major roles that for external programs, and this is key. This is external programs that deliver service to our residents. We're not talking about how Mr. Fletcher organizes, internal activities, but it is council's role and responsibility to identify priorities, not to have it diluted to providing input. So I'm pleased with the revised language, as it simply goes back to what was previously in the policy.
All right, I see no one else registering to comment, so I will just call for the vote. Voting's closed. And that passes unanimously. Is there any more questions on the overall policy and changes? If not, I will pick on somebody to make a motion. Councillor Jolly, you good? We'll get you on the board.
Sure. Cheryl's been putting them all into the chat too, so I don't have to scroll through my agenda package. That in there? I can also look at my agenda package.
It's page 57, if our pack.
Yeah, I've got it. So that the updated policy CAO 15 program and service review attached to the March 19, 2024 agenda report entitled CAO 15 program and service review policy be approved as amended.
Any opening comments?
No, that's good. Good changes. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Voting's closed and that passes unanimously. Thank you, Miss Slowcar. I should call you that instead of Daria, but thank you. Thank you for coming. Are you sticking around for the next one? Okay. But Dawn is kind of come out of the freezer that she's sitting in the back room. Now it's cold. I can feel the cold air coming through. Yeah. And their door is open. But the little cold air has got her energized, and not that Miss Fedora needs any energy. She's got a ton. So we are on the service and service level inventory annual update. Daria, are you going to introduce this? Is that why you?
I will pass it over to Dawn.
Okay.
We'll,
good introduction.
Introduce it and from there. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't have a presentation, but thanks for having us today. Today we're going to talk about the 2024 services and service level inventory. As you know, we are required by policy to have you approve this annually. So the report that you received in your agenda package encompasses all adjustments to service levels that were made in 2023. So there were 6 adjustments in total. The affected services include aquatics amenities, park amenities, specialty sport amenities, curbside leaf pickup, advisory committees, and then our hours of operation, which are in the appendix of the service level inventory. So today I can take any questions that you have. Of course, if they're really specific to the service levels, I may need the help of our directors that are online, or we may have to take an information request.
Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, just going straight to questions. Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, to administration. The on page 63, I'm sorry, page 78, it talks about Bike Skills Park. I wasn't aware we had a specific Bike Skills Park as a service level. Is it part of the skateboard park, or?
I see Danielle online. Go ahead, Danielle.
Thanks through the chair to Councillor Killick. That is part of the skate and the wheel park, the wheeled bike park. So we've got skates and scooters and BMX bikes that ride in that park. So that is really about it being multi-sport accessible. And we revised that language a couple of years ago to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't sure. And then on page 88, it says Crisis Aversion Committee of Residents. And I know we provide crisis aversion funding and did a fabulous job finding shelter during the cold weather in hotels as part of crisis aversion. But it says the funds would be approved by the Crisis Aversion Committee of Residents. And I'm not, maybe we do have a committee of residents, but I don't know about it. I know it goes through FCSS, but
I'm gonna need to have Elizabeth or somebody from her team answer that question. I don't have the answer.
Yeah, and they are regrettably not online right now. We were going to have to take that and get back to you.
Okay.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, I just have a question in relation to our reciprocal use agreement that we've identified as a subservice in relation to management of facility and amenity partnerships. And why wouldn't that be under Juba? Why, or is there something more specific as it relates? So it's on page 75 of our agenda package. It would be like one of the very, I'd be page 558 of the actual document. And I'm just wondering, it's A 1.3B reciprocal use agreement, and it just says reciprocal agreements are in place. And I'm just wondering why we wouldn't have that in Juba rather than,
We haven't approved Juba yet.
Well, I know, but does it exist in both places then, or why?
There is no Juba.
I know there isn't.
Okay.
There's going to be.
So when there is one, then this might be changed, but currently we can't say it's a Juba because we don't have one.
Yeah, but before that, we had other agreements with.
I think it was all just wrapped up in reciprocal use, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a little wider than that. If I could perhaps ask Ms. Podlubny to comment first instance, and we'll follow up from there.
Thanks, Mr. Fletcher. Through the chair to Councillor Mackay. So the reciprocal use in previous, well, as it currently stands now, is a standalone agreement. In the new iteration, it will be a component or appendice to the JUPA. So the joint use and planning agreement. So right now it does stand as an independent agreement, but it will be integrated as we move forward. So to the mayor's point, when we advance and make a revision in the future, we can look to align that language as well.
Okay, and based on our earlier conversations around metrics and performance management, do we know what our metrics are? Do we actually utilize school facilities? I know obviously reciprocal goes the other way, but do we have any programs that we deliver out of school facilities?
Through the chair to Councillor Mackay, we do currently we're navigating between 10 and 13,000 hours of community use in schools on an average annually. So we do facilitate those bookings. They aren't necessarily our direct programs, but they are community users that go into schools and utilize those facilities, whether it be gyms or occasionally classrooms or lunchrooms or the like.
That's good information. Thank you. I didn't realize it was that extensive, but thank you. I just have one more question, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead. Yeah.
It's around kind of our descriptors of level of service. And I'm just wondering, as this document is, so sometimes when we describe the level of service, you know, I can see how we would have to refer like to different areas like policies. I mean, so you have provision. I'm just grabbing one here as I'm going through it. It just struck me when I was reading this. Some are tied to other council policies. So we have provision of public art is governed by this council policy and then other ones. And then yet when we get down to like land use bylaw, we get really descriptive actually in the level of service that we actually put in the document. So is there a way, I'm just trying to like do some little green tape reduction here. Is there a way of like, why would we say that under land use bylaw, you're going to respond in X number of days, or this, you're going to front counter service, you're going to respond in this number of days, and have it actually in the document versus tying it where other times you have it actually a link to other parts of the policy, wherever it's located. Is there a reason that we kind of have it in out that way?
I'll start and then others may jump in. I think the main reason is that we didn't want to duplicate in service level inventory what's already documented in policies. And not all of our, excuse me, major services have policies. So the way to streamline the process was to refer to policy that's already established with more details included in that policy for particular service. Where some of the other ones, an example that you use, this is available on our website. So maybe we don't have residents going through the service level inventory, but at some point, you know, we would like to make it more user-friendly. Hours of operation or expectations related to turnaround time, we felt it's important to be transparent and provide that information to residents. So that's really the main difference, is we didn't want to repeat what's already in the policy in the inventory. So we recognize that there's a policy.
Yeah, no, it was just more curiosity from my perspective, because I just saw it as inconsistent, because the one I was looking at was around individual and family supports. And then you know, the description of the St. Albert subsidy program, you actually identify each one of those issues, and versus why wouldn't you just have a link to back to the actual web page or the policy or the web page or the thing. I mean, I just, that's all. I would think it would be easier for you if you were doing the inventory, because for example, you got memberships, free 6-month membership or at either. I mean, those things are already in our process somewhere else. So I don't want to get into minutia, but I was just curious in relation to why in one place we actually have a link and in other places where a lot of detail, and you probably could have just had a link.
And that's very good feedback, and thank you for sharing. As you know, we've kind of evolved input. We have evolved this practice and have made changes over the years. So perhaps it's something that we take a look at as we continue to evolve and, you know, provide more consistency, but also the right level of detail in the inventory.
Yeah, and I would say that's exactly it. So there is an evolution that occurs for this document, and so, you know, as you would know better than I, the genesis was getting everything together in the first instance, and then as we go on, may not engender a change in service levels, but how that's represented and ultimately where that sits, I think is a continued sort of policing and cleaning up of the document itself. Yeah.
And one more thing to consider is that policies are approved by council, but sometimes if there's no applicable policy, the service level is your way to approve those standards. So it's two ways to get council approval on a level of service. So for some of our services that aren't related to a specific policy, this is an opportunity to get your approval on those.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just found it a little inconsistent, and that's all.
All good. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I don't mean to be like a dog with a bone here, but on page 78, so outdoor playgrounds and service level indoor playgrounds are operating in alignment with the Canadian Standard Association playground standards. Is the standard that currently exists, does it define accessibility or not?
Yeah, I think we'll turn that over to Danielle. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Broadhead, I'd have to go back and refer to it. I haven't referred to the standards in a couple of years, but they weren't specifically related to accessibility. They're more related to a CSA, like a safety standard that's in place for playgrounds and has safety practices that we follow in building playgrounds that ensure the safety of users. So it's more around safety, not so much around accessibility. We are looking at building in accessible features into our playgrounds as appropriate when we replace them, knowing community need, but it's more features, not fully accessible playgrounds, which is the one we're exploring at Lodgepole right now and have recently completed at Fountain Park.
Okay, well, I ask only because whether or not making up in my own mind whether I would like to ask for a service review. So anyway, thank you for that. Thanks.
I like it when you're a dog with a bone. That's good. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the Snelbert Place hours. And I know he's always been that way, but I just love to understand why it's open from like 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. when during those hours there's a time frame on both ends where nothing else is open except for the front door. So I know that sometimes like the Art and Theater will be open late, and sometimes it might be open early for dance competitions, but that's also segmented off. So I don't know if you guys can come back and think about it, but that's just the one thing you have an answer. Because that's the one thing I'm just wondering about is why, it could be for the washrooms, but the only thing I have is just that there's a lot of stuff in this building. And I know that the main floor is only one of, everything else gets locked off, but there's just also like security issue, I guess, is like if someone's coming at 10:30 at night, I don't want to be that security guard that has to be there alone in the building while people come in and there's nobody else around. So that's why I was just wondering.
Thanks for the question. Through the chair to Councillor Hughes. So part of the rationale is the washroom access. It's also supporting all of the facilities in the facility, like the Art and Theater, all our organizations that use the Snelbert Place, such as the Pottery Studios and those facilities as well. So it's and security is on site, so it aligns to the security hours.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any more questions around service levels? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Killett, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, that the updated service and service levels inventory provided as an attachment to the March 19th, 2024 agenda report entitled Service and Service Levels Inventory Annual Update be approved. And 2, that the approved update version of this service and service levels inventory replace the version currently attached to Council Policy CFS-05 Budget and Taxation Guiding Principles, Schedule 1, Services and Service Levels Inventory.
Awesome. Any opening comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I am absolutely over the moon that Councillor Mackay did not mention grass cutting when service.
But you
levels.
do.
It's level 2C parks.
There we go. No, I think this has done a great job of providing the necessary updates, and the summary is the 6 items that have been discussed by council through various motions. So they're all accurately captured in very good detail. So I think this is a great summary of the current service levels, and will continue to deliver great services to the residents as they expect them.
All right, anyone else have any comments? I'm shocked that when Mr. Schick is in the room, there's not more questions for him. He's hiding in the back. There weren't a lot around his department, so that's good, because sometimes we get completely off track when Dean's in the room.
He's here for the next agenda item, actually.
Yeah, but still, we can see him hiding in the corner. There's got to be some service level questions, but no, we're good. Anything to close?
This very accurately captures all the requests. So great report. Thank you for the work of pulling it all together and doing the review with us today.
Thank you. Call for the vote. Voting is closed. Yeah, sorry. And that passes unanimously. All right, now we are on to the brain crunching, most confusing subject of all council agendas, offsite levies. I'll let them get set up. While you guys are going, and because Dean is in the room, it's not a question, it's a comment while you guys are getting set up. I ran into a very nice lady on the weekend. She lives on Beaverbrook Crescent. And remember, there was some concerns about the temporary turning lane, and now it's permanent, I guess. And she was overwhelmed and super happy with how it all turned out. And I told her the temporary ones are sometimes difficult to navigate and understand, but anyway, feedback to you. I think you've probably spoken to her in the past. She said she had. Anyway, it was just a kudos of a job well done. So while you're setting up. You're sweet. You ready? All right, take it away, Tanya.
Good afternoon, council. My name is Tanya Hines and I'm the city's offsite levy specialist. I'm happy to be here today to present this year's.
Is that actually your title? City's offsite levy specialist?
Yeah, it got changed this year.
Oh, thank God for you. Keep going, sorry.
So I provide some highlights from this year's annual report and this year's offsite levy bylaw update. So under the city's offsite levy bylaw, the offsite levy projects and rates must be reviewed no less than every third year. However, the offsite levy model and the rates are updated annually in order to prepare the offsite levy annual report for council. This annual report details what infrastructure has been constructed and its cost, the estimated construction cost for the infrastructure that still has to be built, how much offsite levies were collected, and the amount of any offsite levy reserves. And we last updated the bylaw in April of 2023. There was one text change made to the offsite levy bylaw this year. So collecting offsite levies at the development permit stage is rare. However, there are times when land is developed at this stage and it is not part of a subdivision approval. And this single occurrence may be the only opportunity to make this collection. So section 12.1 has been added to the bylaw to clarify that in these instances, offsite levies are always calculated based on the total area of the lot, even if only a portion of the lot is actually being developed under that development permit. And that imposition of the offsite levy can be triggered by any development permit, even if it's a temporary one. So when we are updating the offsite levy model, there are a number of factors which will impact the offsite levy rates. This includes the amount of net developable area available, construction and land costs, timing of development, interest rates, the number of front-ended projects undertaken, reserve balances, as well as the total number of projects needed to support growth and development. The city's offsite levy bylaw states that all undeveloped lands are subject to offsite levies regardless of whether it is to be developed for commercial, industrial, institutional, community, or residential uses. A flat rate for intensity is applied to all developable lands, with the exception of lands that are to be dedicated for arterial roads, environmental reserve, municipal reserve, and stormwater public utility lots. When we're first establishing project costs, we'll rely on estimates that are provided in our master planning documents, like our utility and transportation master plans. And over time, as new or more detailed project information is obtained, those costs are refined. So some of the highlights of the 2024 update are The new rates provide an update for submitted 2023 construction costs. The new rates will include any updated project cost estimates, and those are based on planning, pre-design, and design work. And this year, we anticipate that reserve balances will earn an interest rate of about 5.29%. This is a significant increase over the last year's rate, which was just over 2%. And we predict that any reserve shortfall will be charged an interest rate of about 4.92%. And this is only slightly lower than last year's rate, which was just over 5%. So when we calculate remaining net development area, the model only considers land that has yet to be developed within the city and they haven't paid offsite levies previously. Currently, we have 1,855 hectares of land still to be developed in the city. It is expected that about 1,168 hectares of land will be developed within the next 25 years. We do anticipate that these figures will be further refined over time as land use planning advances in the latest annexation areas. This year, we have included a map, and that shows what lands are included in the 25-year development timeframe. So if you're the green areas depict the lands within the timeframe. The orange areas will they only have some of their areas included, and the gray areas are outside the current development timeframe. And you may also notice the values don't always equal 100, and this is attributed to rounding and formulas that are contained in the model. All remaining net development area is assigned a project year of development in the offsite levy model. Planning assists in providing this estimate, which we do update annually. What planning will do is they will look at the approved subdivisions that have been executed, and if they've executed a development agreement with that, they will also consider when they expect other approved subdivisions to start construction, and they'll consider redistricting applications which may be in process or recently approved. And finally, they'll look at whether an area is part of an approved area structure plan and if there's any pending applications coming. And finally, we'll also look to our long-term planning growth scenarios to predict when and where development will occur. We do recognize that the accuracy of estimation for timing of development deteriorates the further into the future you look. So this is why it's important that we look at these numbers annually and update the bylaw with new data as we obtain it. So the 25-year development timeframe focuses developers' costs today, more so on the infrastructure that benefits development today, and less so on infrastructure that will be built in the future. So in addition to considering what lands will be developed and when, staging will also factor in when infrastructure is going to be built, the current offsite levy rates, the rates calculated before staging is applied. They assume all of the offsite levy, when the rates are calculated before staging is applied, it will assume that all of the offsite levy infrastructure projects will be built immediately and all the lands will be developed immediately, and therefore all of the required offsite levies required to pay for the infrastructure will be collected immediately. However, this is not reflective of how development occurs. So staging divides the cost of a project by 25 years and then calculates an annual project cost. So the model then includes a pro rata amount in current rates based on the project's planned year of construction. So for example, if we use a 25-year time frame from 2024 to 2048, and we have a project plan to be constructed in 2040, then the calculator will actually include 9 years worth of costs in today's rates. And so as the development time frame extends out further in subsequent years, the amount included in the rates changes and more project costs are gradually entered into the rates. However, if a project is constructed, all of the costs are calculated in the rates and the project costs are recovered within the 25 years. So using a 25-year development timeframe for calculating levies does increase risk to the city because the model is underfunded until all lands are developed and project costs are collected. We mitigate that risk by continuing to update the model annually and by not approving construction of projects that are not within the 25-year development timeframe, unless the offsite levy bylaw is updated to include those project costs within the levy rate calculation. So the offsite levy model contains a staging adjustment. This will adjust the offsite levy rates by taking into account inflation, when projects will be constructed, when levies will be collected, and the interest impacts on reserve accounts. So at times we know the offsite levy reserves will not be sufficient to fund project construction. So during those times, we have to use front ending. And so when the reserve balance is in a positive position, it will earn interest. And when the reserve balance is negative, obviously the reserve is charged interest. And the reserve balances represent a point in time, and each of the offsite levy infrastructure categories is recalculated annually. So the forecasted levy account balance will net zero. The staging cost adjustment determines how much the rates have to be adjusted to deal with the impacts of staging, so that at the end of the 25-year development timeframe, the reserve balances are at zero. So sometimes this will result in the staging adjustment increasing levies, and sometimes it will decrease levies. We're going to talk about some of the project updates now. So for the sanitary category, there were a couple of changes made. So project 2, which is the Northeast gravity trunk, there was a cost estimate was increased, and that was based on our opinion of probable cost. We have project 5, which was renamed the Southwest Lift Station Force Main and Gravity Trunk, because some of our design reports show a portion of this land can be serviced through gravity. And the cost estimate for project 14 was increased based on a growth charter created by the Utilities Department. So as a result of the completion of the 2023 Northwest Annexation Area Bridging Document, 3 new projects are also being added to the offsite levy model. So we have project 17, which is over on the Avenir, and we're calling it the Avenir Gravity Subtrunk, and that's a 900mm gravity trunk. We have project 18, which is the Carrot Creek Sanitary Sewer Crossing. And so that's 597 meters of 675mm sanitary sewer. And we have project 19, which is a Northwest Gravity Trunk, and that's quite a big line at 2492 meters of 600mm gravity. And if you're looking at the map, you might notice there's a kind of a red blob at the top. And so that's offsite levy reference areas 59, 64, and 77. And so their allocation is now changed. They're going to be flowing south and then east rather than through Erin Ridge North. So the projects they're benefiting from have changed. The staging adjustment of advancing the development timeframe by 1 year, higher anticipated borrowing cost to front-end infrastructure, and an increase to 2 significant projects and the addition of 3 new projects influenced the increase in sanitary offsite levy rates that were seen in some benefiting areas. And as master planning is completed for the lands within the annexed areas, it is anticipated that there may be some additional sanitary projects added to the offsite levy model in the future. So currently we have $94.5 million remaining to be collected for sanitary offsite levies. And of that, 88 million is within the current 25-year development timeframe. And so if you're looking at the pie chart, the orange portion represents what's in the current offsite levy rates. Now, this is a graph that shows the city's sanitary offsite levy reserve is predicted to be in a negative balance until 2048. You can see significant amounts have been spent already on sanitary projects, and most of the remaining expenditures will be in the next 10 years. There were no changes made to the stormwater infrastructure category for 2024, other than project cost updates. So as a result of further project design work undertaken in 2023, changes are being made to project 5. The cost estimate was updated to reflect the opinion of probable cost. The staging adjustment of advancing the development timeframe by 1 year, higher anticipated borrowing cost to front-end the infrastructure, and a substantial increase to the estimated total project cost for project 5 did influence significant increase in most stormwater offsite levy rates. And just like the sanitary, that as we get into more master planning document or planning, we do anticipate that there might be some additional projects added in the future. So currently we have $30.12 million remaining to be collected for stormwater offsite levies. And of that, $29.96 million is within the 25-year development timeframe. This graph shows the city's stormwater offsite levy reserve is predicted to be in a negative balance until 2048, although the majority of costs will be incurred in the next few years. Excuse me.
There were minor changes made for the water infrastructure category for 2024. The estimated construction dates for projects 6 and 8 were updated and moved further into the future to align with the planned construction of the North Reservoir. So their project costs were also updated as per the 2023 project charters. So these changes offset the staging adjustment of advancing the development timeframe by 1 year, which influenced the minor decrease in water offsite levy rates. Sorry. I don't usually talk this much. So currently we have $82.1 million remaining to be collected for water offsite levies. And of that, 28.6 million is within the current 25-year development timeframe. So this graph shows that the city's water offsite levy reserve is predicted to have a positive balance until the North Reservoir is built. Also, with the staging of new reservoirs and expansions, we should be able to keep the negative balance relatively low during the 25-year development timeframe. Excuse me. There were several changes made to the roads infrastructure category for 2024. The overall value of the roads category decreased from $490.1 million to $487.5 million. And there was a reduction, in the offsite levy road rate as some larger projects were split into smaller projects and which gave them staggered construction start years. There were also some reductions or escalations in some projects' cost estimates. So these changes offset the staging adjustment of advancing the development timeframe by 1 year. So you'll see that we did have a significant decrease and the levies have gone down by over $21,000 per hectare for roads. So some of the major changes were that St. Albert Trail has been split from 2 projects into 5 projects. So previously, project 20 and 21 only contained developer share and then only what the developers were paying towards those, but that was a bit confusing. So we've now split it into 5 projects. So project 20 still contains 100% of developers' previous costs and only 65% of St. Albert Trail phases 1 and 2. Project 21 will have just the previous developers' costs included in it. And now we've created 3 new projects. So we've actually split, we have phases 3, 4, and 5 becoming new projects, and they contain a city contribution amount based on the scope of the work. So as we get further into design, there is a potential that those could change a little bit if the scope of the project is changed. We also split Villeneuve Road west of Ray Gibbon Drive into 2 projects. Hogan Road was split into 3 projects. Sir Winston Churchill Avenue was split into 2 projects. Range Road 260 became 3. And Fowler Way actually had a cost estimate, and that was increased due to a 2023 report. So currently there's $336.25 million remaining to be collected for transportation offsite levies. And of that, $283.8 million is within the current 25-year development timeframe. You can see from the graph that the city's roadway offsite levy reserve is predicted to be in a negative balance until 2048, and most of the expenditures will be within the next 15 years. We also have had significant project expenditures to collect levies on for projects that have been built since the offsite levy model was adopted. As you can see, we're already quite heavily down the reserve right now. We do anticipate there's going to be some additional roadway projects required in the northern part of the city, and they're not included in this year's update. Because we have some more work to do on those. So the reserve balance in the future might look a little bit different. So overall, the offsite levy program is valued at $813 million. To date, developers in the city have constructed $241.6 million of that infrastructure. So these investments in offsite levy infrastructure, as well as the many projects that are being constructed or designed throughout the city, demonstrate that there continues to be a strong commitment to support growth and development in the city. So as of December 31st, 2023, we had front-ending parties waiting to be reimbursed for $65.3 million. The city's carrying about 93% of the front-ending costs, with developers waiting to be reimbursed for about 7%. And almost all of the front-ending projects waiting for reimbursement are related to roads or sanitary. Council is being asked today to reimburse parties $4.98 million in accordance with council policy, and that will leave $60.34 million in front-ending costs still to be paid out. And so finally for 2024, so key objectives of the offsite levy working group, and that's the working group between city staff and active developers in the community, is planned to determine a connector roadway contribution formula, and that's to finalize some recovery listings for eligible road projects. And we're also looking at what new roadway projects are required in the northern part of the city with that group. So thank you for allowing me to present to council today. I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
So one of the first questions I had was the composition of the working group. So it's the development community and city staff. Because it said the working group did not make any recommended changes to be made to the bylaw this year. So the development community is happy with what we've got in front of us today.
Yeah, I didn't have, after the information session, I had one follow-up email with some questions and then nothing else.
There you go. Perfect. Now, did you say we carry 98% of the front ending in the city? 98%?
93%.
93? Okay. Still high, yeah. But I'll open up to questions. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If you could return to the beginning of your presentation, I want to ask you a little bit about 25 years. One of the things that we went on a tour a number of years ago, and other communities said St. Albert is expensive to develop in because our ASPs are small and our benefiting basins are small. How would you react to a comment like that?
Well, I wouldn't say, I guess physically where our community is fairly small, but we only have one single transportation basin right now, and we only have one water basin right now. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily true. I think that our program is quite evolved, and you'll see some communities may have less of a handle on their program, and so and they're starting to catch up. I think you're going to see some changes in other municipalities in the next few years.
Okay, fair enough. So what would the impact be? You noted a risk. If there was more, what would the risk be if all of the annex lands were now part of the offsite levy rather than just a portion thereof?
Well, it's just in the 25 years. So what will happen is as we see more growth coming on and we start looking at what years we predict, some years they may come in. So right now we're predicting that this is how the growth is going to work with the 25 years, but you might see some changes on the map. Whereas if a new area structure plan was coming in and a new neighborhood plan came in and they were predicting like growth sooner, then you would see that would come in and those lands would become part of it. But you might also see some changes in the projects themselves being put in because you might need some additional projects to support that development. So then those change those numbers. And that's why we say, well, we look at it every year, right? Because you're trying to best make sure that the rates reflect anything that could come within that 25 years.
All right. So given that you only pay offset levies once, and we've got some new necessary developments in the Northeast, would you suggest that areas that are already constructed and already paid, are they did they cover their cost of future development or not?
I think, yes, there's
Okay.
some parts that it's just, it's a proportionate share of what you benefit from. So some people or some developers will benefit from more projects or they require more infrastructure to support them. So they have to pay, they'll have a higher levy rate because there's just more projects that they're contributing to. And this side, there's, especially on the northeast side, those projects are going to support a lot of development. So there's a lot of land contributing to those. And it's anticipated, like you said, that once lands, like I said, you have 25 years, once you expend the money on the construction to pay for it.
Okay, all right. Well, I certainly appreciate you doing this. I've listened to you give this presentation a number of years, and I'm always somewhat amazed because it seems like black magic to me to what you come up with all the time. But in any case, thank you very much for those answers. I appreciate it.
Councillor Broadhead asked a good question about some of the new developments. And I know we only collect levies once, but when we do infill and we have to upgrade sanitary or roads, we're doing that because the new owner of the land who's doing the infill will not owe us any offsite levies, right? Because it's been paid. Is there any movement provincially to change that, to allow for us to collect from the new developer to upgrade a road or a sewer pipe?
Not that I'm aware of, but I know we've talked about potentially having to investigate with our infill strategies, some other ways to pay, whether it's I'm hesitant to use, I would call it more of a connection fee or something to that effect. Redevelopment levies under the MGA are quite specific in what they can be used for, so I don't want to use that term. But there could be some kind of cost sharing that, but we'll develop that and look at those types of things when we're doing the planning thing on infill.
Of course, if there's just not enough sewer capacity and somebody wants to do it, then maybe they come to the table willingly. I'm not sure how that works, but. Councillor Hughes.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of follow up on what Councillor Broadhead said. So, because let's say a few years ago, the offset levies were less, right? And so let's say they're paying 200,000. I'm pulling numbers literally out of the air here. So let's say we're paying 200,000 and then we reevaluate the projects and we're like, okay, no, that actually turns out they're a lot more expensive. So then we raise the rates to 300,000, but the guys that paid 2, like we're still missing money at the end of the day to pay for the full project, or do we have to raise them that much more to compensate for the ones that paid less initially? Like, how do we make the whole balance sheet equal to 0 and not put it on us to pay the difference because we charged less before we realize the true cost?
So what could happen is that, yes, today's developer might have to pay more if there was a cost escalation that wasn't calculated. So, but the idea with it being that, but a lot of the costs, the price escalations are also reflected in the construction costs have gone up. So in past, it cost less to build the road. Therefore, the fact that they paid a certain amount, so they were paying a proportionate share of that time of development. So I think running the 25-year model is, it's my preference because it does actually give us an end date. Our old model, which we used to have be a 35-year, was always rolling in, but then because you would never actually pay for a full project until all of the land was developed. And so in theory, if that 35-year model kept moving forward and forward and forward, it could be until like every piece of land was developed, that project wasn't actually fully recovered. So now we have 25 years to do it, which is actually pretty reflective of really, that's a pretty long time, 25 years. So.
Okay, so because when I look at the amount in the pots of each category, they're not that big. Like I'm like a little concerned here because it's like somewhere like 800,000, somewhere there weren't that much in there, but we are collecting them obviously. So is it that the bulk of what we're collecting is currently going to service debt that we already have agreed to? Or I'm just trying to figure, because in my mind, they should be like 10 or 14 million. I'm just, again, pulling numbers, but that's just like naive me thinks. So can you explain why they're so low?
projects themselves or just the rate?
What we have in reserves, like, because I think you had a slide with the reserves and it didn't look like it was a really big number unless I misread that page.
Yes, no, so what is, because we pay out those reserves every year, we are waiting to be reimbursed, so and to keep the costs down, we pay, like, we sort of pay back any front ending parties with any reserves we collect right away, like within that year or the next year. So that we can try to, because otherwise we pay interest to developers extra on top of that, which then makes the cost of the project go up. But so if you're not building anything, like, so in our case of the water reserve, most of that money is been collected for a reservoir. And so as soon as we build a reservoir, then, but we won't have to borrow very much money to build a reservoir. But so it's just, if we didn't collect a lot, the reserves last year physically, or just because we only had 4.98 million to give out, it was just a slower year for growth. A lot of the developers were, working on their projects that they already had. So we didn't have any, some years we might get $10 million come in to disperse. Is that what you mean by the actual current reserve?
No, I don't remember which slide it was, but it was like way back and you had like the different categories and it was like one had like 1.6 million and one had like 810,000. And I'm assuming that's the stuff that's not being dispersed. Like we have some in the pot for future development. I feel like I'm talking really, really loud. I just have to keep moving this. No.
Yeah, if you give us a second, we'll pull up the slideshow.
Sure, because maybe I misinterpreted the slide. But how much, I guess, is a clarification. How much do we have in the pots then? Because if I'm misreading it, like if we had to develop for something tomorrow, we have some money in the different categories. And I'm assuming it was that number that you pulled up.
Sure, sorry, I'm just. Wasn't the disbursement ones?
No, it was like middle of it. I should have recorded the slide number, but
Okay, sorry.
just keep on going back. I just go to like the 14, it'll be where I'd start. Just pull
kind of
14
like
out of
this one?
nowhere.
Like the pie
Nope,
charts? No.
keep on going back though. I think that one,
Okay,
it had like all the numbers that were in the pots.
or just text. Yeah.
Well, apparently 14 was a little too early.
Oh,
No,
you don't mean these, not the graphs?
All of them?
it was, I had all of them in there. Like you said, one slide that had how much is in each one.
Okay. Water. So it was the actual what we were paying out. Okay.
The back one?
Is that it?
Oh,
that one?
No.
No, it was before that. Sorry. I got all excited there. It was just a slide or two before this one, I felt like. No, it wasn't a chart. It was just a list.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I should have just recorded it. Oh, no. It was still too high. That was still too high. It was like 810,000 was one of the numbers.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, it's on page 139 in the agenda of council.
Oh, good.
We're looking for the slideshow.
Yeah.
Oh, is it just in the agenda?
Well, apparently it was in the agenda, but
So it's not in the slideshow, maybe.
it was in the slideshow though. I wasn't just making this up in my brain,
Thanks, Councilor Bermansky.
but I will go to one.
What page was it again?
139. Yeah, so it says as of December 31st, there's 4.1 million in roads, 18 in water, 810 in sanitary, and 915 K in storm. So it seems low. Like I see what we're collecting for water, because we talked about the water project.
Yeah.
It wasn't a slide though, in my defense.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, that's actually the reserve. So I'll go back to the reserve slides.
tell me it's on page 14, just so I'd like randomly.
So this
just
is
write
where
them
we're
down.
actually paying people out.
Yeah.
And so in this case, the city's owed $33 million still in like sanitary. But because we get paid out every year, like what we collect, that's why there's not that much money in the sanitary, because we pay it out because we're still waiting for money. And so are developers. So that's where we do there's an attachment and that gives you the breakdown for each project, and it's So that's the reconciliation. So that's when we're actually paying back the front ending parties. That's why there's not much money in the reserves, because we've spent it. And we're still spending it.
Because this is what I'm trying to figure out.
This is why we have to, like, if we do some borrowing, we have to take out debentures.
Mhm.
And then the debenture interest gets added to the project cost, and then we add it into like our roadway. Like, so let's say I took out a loan for $10 million, and then I added, and it was gonna charge me like $4 million in interest. So in the next year, I would add the $4 million plus if I did some construction with that. And so what I was owed would change from like 27 to now it would be like 31 million for the interest. And then so we do collect our interest back. But right now, there's just no money in those reserves because we've done such heavy investment in our infrastructure, which if we went back and looked at the overall, like what we've actually spent to date. So like we've spent over almost $161 million in transportation projects already to date. So the fact that we're owed like 27.5 isn't too bad. Like, so, but that explains why there's not very much money in the actual category to give back right now.
Because, and this is where I'm not sure if I'll be able to understand it, so just please bear with me. But so we have these projects to the north, for example, like that, we hear about this storm and cemetery for like 60 million, right? And then the argument is, okay, well, we're giving offsite levies, so therefore you should be able to make all of your payments. And then the argument's also like, you should take out all the debt on this. But what I feel like is like, we're actually like chasing something right now because we get the debt and then we use the money to pay off the debt. And then we just keep going back. And so basically we're in a perpetual debt cycle to be able to fund the infrastructure because all the money that we're using, collecting the vast majority of it is just being used to handle the debt that we've already come into. That's what it looks like. So if it's not that.
So if the model collects money based on like, so let's say there's 25 projects in a category and it's almost like there's 25 little pots of money. And so when someone pays their water levy, the model will say, oh, a little bit goes in this project, a little bit goes in this project. What we can do and what we do is we treat the water reserve and only water reserve, because you can't mix the categories, is we try to benefit from the economies of scale. So if you think about that, if it's going to take me 25 years to collect all the money to put in that one little pot for that one project, and let's say I owed it to the developer, and I would have to then say, oh, I've only got, 10% of the money. So now I need to borrow 90%. But if I use money that's in that whole pot, that I can benefit from that, pay for the one project. And then it keeps allocating, like the project always pays for itself, but I'm using the benefit of the money that's available now so I don't have to pay as much interest. It keeps the rates down lower, but nobody's paying more than their fair share, but it allows us to use the funds that are available. So we don't need to necessarily wait and hold each individual project.
Okay, this is obviously just extremely complicated, but that's how it does feel, is that we're somehow paying for yesterday's purchases with today's money in some cases. And then in some cases we can pay for it now if it's a small project versus a large project, and we again continue to go back into this cycle.
Well,
so then it feels like all major projects are going to involve debt. And we can't actually, like for utilities, we collect in advance for the money, so we don't have to go into debt. But it feels like in this situation, we don't really have that luxury, not necessarily because of today, but because of previous decisions.
I think the challenge with this type of infrastructure is it's a little bit chicken and egg. And that's what we talk about, like in the staging part, is like, we assume that like to support the development that they're benefiting from, you need the infrastructure in the ground. But we also can't charge them for it, and they can't actually build. So the people who are paying for that infrastructure need the infrastructure to be able to build, so you could collect the levies. So
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just don't have a solution. But thank you for trying to explain this to me anyway. Okay, I'm going to stop asking questions, so my
This is
brain
always
starts
the most
getting exploded.
That's how I started this whole thing. It's the most confusing thing that council ever has to deal with. Yeah. Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To administration, the policy change specifically, just like to understand a little bit better. 12.1 section B, it says, regardless how much of that lot or parcel is covered by the development permit. So my simplistic understanding of that, that's actually better for St. Albert. So we will collect the offsite levy for the whole lot or parcel rather than just the part that's developed. Is that
If it's
correct?
a development permit, yes. So the reason we do that is that if it's not subject to a subdivision, they may never come back. And so if we were to only collect, and if it's one parcel under the MGA, you can collect once. And so we would end up being short on that if we didn't take it all at one time.
Right. Okay, so that's a good benefit St. Albert, and it de-risks the whole
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, and it's always been that way. We just added that clarification. We just had a few different examples come in the last year where we just wanted to remove any ambiguity that was in the bylaw and so make it crystal clear about what our expectation was for collection.
Okay, great. And could you explain then what the difference between a lot or parcel is? It's a weird nuance that I'm familiar with a lot, but I've never heard the term parcel.
A parcel of land could be a remainder piece of a lot. It could be, so a lot, specific there, I would use them interchangeably and be quite comfortable, but.
Okay. Good. I guess the bottom line is that this is good clarification, and it's a net benefit for St. Albert to have this clarity. So that's good. I have a general question then about connector roads, and my gosh, please help me on terminology, Dean, for connector roads. This is proposing something new be added to offsite levies that we don't currently collect for.
No.
No?
Nope. So in the old days, arterial roads were just arterial roads and there were collectors. And do you want to go to it? No? Okay. And so, but now there are different types of arterials. So we're still only including arterials in them, but they have different names. So we have boulevards, we have connectors, and we have crosstowns. So they are in there. We're just wanting to define so that we don't run into like when we're looking at things like Villeneuve Road and we had that change in the percentage. We want to try to see if we can determine if there's actually like a formula that we can determine that we could be applied. So that's something for the working group to kind of work through together with our partners in development to see if there's a way that we could have a consistent approach and that way there's no surprises.
Okay, I'm going to try and summarize this in my own mind then that, again, this is something good for St. Albert, gives more clarity to the developers. It's not something that we missed in the past or weren't collecting offsite levies for.
Yeah, no, we haven't missed anything. We're evolving the program all the time.
Okay.
Hear that continuous improvement. That's us.
Yeah. Good. No, that's good. I just was wondering if it was something we were missing. The question I had then too was around on page 208. It's project 20 and it's a road project.
Okay.
So in the notes, it talks about a different split. And I just wondered if I could get a little bit of clarity as to what that actually, it's a footnote actually.
Do you mean in the descriptor?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reason why it was before last year when we did the update, we only had the cost, it showed 100% split to the developer. And what we did was we still only put 65% of the city's costs in there. But this way, by changing the name descriptor, I was just really trying to clarify, we've gone down this project too far to split everything out. So I just wanted to keep it up, but I wanted it to be super clear that it's like, this is 100% of any past developer that has paid and collected, but only 65% of the St. Albert Trail Phase 1 and 2 costs. So that it was very clear that it's still, even though it shows 100% in those projects, it's only 65%, which you'll see that reflected in those other projects. It's a much clearer delineation of 65-35.
Okay, great. That's that the 65-35 was a big discussion point last year. So I wanted to just touch on that and make sure that that was clear, and great that it's identified that way. It's awesome. Just a general question, and this was something that I think Councillor Broadhead may have touched on, but when I looked at comparable offsite levy rates in the region, and this is a report that Corvus issued, which is who we use to assist us in our offsite levy rates. Their big detailed attachment as part of the agenda report. It shows other areas, and like Beaumont, their average per hectare is somewhere between $50,000 to $75,000 per hectare. Spruce Groves is 128 per hectare. Ours is 325,000 per hectare. It seems to me that, and I don't understand why this huge discrepancy, nor not discrepancy, huge difference in the rates when it goes, we're all paying the same construction, we're all paying the same labor, the same material, pretty much, to develop a hectare of land.
There's a lot of factors that can impact that. So
We develop at a higher standard, really. Yeah.
well, depending on what they're using, like, so you might have one community that has more provincial roads in it, or has less. So at the end of the day, it comes down to the number of projects, really, right? That you need to support development. So some of those places may have more of a, maybe they don't, maybe they're physically smaller, so they may only need one reservoir. We may have 4 reservoirs. They may have things like, they've got, big highways running through their community, and they're kind of insulated by that. So they don't have, or they're keeping things to more of a rural standard, things like that. There's so many different things that influence the rate. I always, there's no apples to apples, it's a fruit basket, right? Because some communities also, like Strathcona County, their industrial tax base pays for some of the infrastructure that our developers pay for, things like that, right? There's just a lot of different policies and projects that will just influence those rates.
Okay, do the developers understand that? Because dollars are very transportable, and I've often heard like it's expensive to develop in St. Albert, and but your explanation, which I totally get, I mean, we have a higher standard and all the factors that we've discussed. Do the developers generally say, yes, we're getting, the $325,000 per hectare is a good rate? Like they don't ever kind of come back and say, yeah, well, why is it cheaper somewhere else?
No, I don't ever get the comparative from our developers. I think there's an expectation that they know that this is what it costs to develop in St. Albert. As long as we're being transparent about what forms that rate, they, obviously nobody wants to pay a higher rate, but no, there's never a question about, comparing us really to other, not to me anyway, to other developers.
Yeah, no, it could, I'm purely looking at this as a paper exercise, printout from Spruce Grove. For some reason, they wanted to see that comparator in the region, and, they're mid pack. And I just wondered if that was, if there was any underlying.
When was that dated, Councillor Killick? Do you know?
It was it was printed, the source data was end of 2021, and it does say municipalities may be updating their process or, so.
I think they were probably curious because didn't Spruce Grove add recreation to their offsite levies?
Yeah.
So they might have been curious to make sure if they added that,
Yeah.
it would still be competitive, which I believe they still are. And they're collecting a recreation offsite levy.
Well, that's a perfect lead into my next
yeah.
question. Thank you. Has any thought, or let me maybe phrase it differently. Is there an advantage, for example, Spruce Grove, again, collects their offsite levies for their new rec center? Because again, it says it's shared, the benefit of the rec center is shared by all developers or development in Spruce Grove. Likewise, they built a library that also is in their offsite levy, and fire station. So my question is there an advantage to have these big capital projects funded through, and the MJA allows it? Is there an advantage to including that those types of projects in our offsite levy process, as opposed to driving that through taxpayer funded borrowing? And
So one of the things we talked about was the change in my job description at the start of the presentation. So we recognize that the program itself is becoming more complex with the more projects we're doing, just the dollar values, the fact that we haven't had the opportunity to look at whether we should include these soft service categories into the model, things like that. So we're trying to put a little more time, and rather than I do it for 3 months of the year, hoping that we'll be able to spend more time working on it. We also want to look at our programs and see if there's other ways that we can look at like funding models, things like that, so that we can not rely on debt necessarily to fund projects and things like that. But so it's, I would like to say it's a work in progress, I guess, maybe. I don't know if you want to.
No, 100%. And so, I mean, there are other options, but I think they need to be approached very deliberately. And so that is the work that Tanya's alluding to, right? And carving out the capacity to sort of focus on that as we go forward. I think it's also interesting to map out and see what the experiences of a couple of communities who are gone that route and see what the implications are.
so it's less of, as Councillor Broadhead said, black magic, and it's more like cloning of Tanya's time. Is that?
I think it's sort of relative prioritization of what we're asking her to do 100%. And then
I shouldn't make light of it because it's a very important subject. I think there's maybe some opportunities. I don't fully understand. That's why I asked the question of, offsite levies versus tax funded and borrowing. But I would look forward to, at the end of that 3 months, to see what recommendations is brought forward to council.
All right, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll be quick because a lot of my questions have been asked. I'm just curious, you identify that the 30-day offsite levy payment deferral pilot program that we had out in 2022 didn't get any developers using it in 2023. Was there a reason? I know you're going to monitor over 2024. Was it just because the pilot, we identified one developer that wanted to go ahead, so we said we'll do this? Or
I think depending on the developer themselves, some of them maybe just, they pay their levies up front, and it's just waiting the 30 days might be more of a administrative burden for them than to not, and others do need it. And it's just a matter of who was developing last year.
so it's possible that it's probably you saying that you're going to determine its efficacy in 2024. So it might come back and say, look, if there's no uptake in this, and we may just not
Yeah,
offer
and-
it, or is there still some value even just always having it on the books just in case?
I think there's some value in it, even just for those smaller developers that might need the extra little bit of like that cash flow advantage. So we'll see what happens this year, but I think it just depends on who happens to be coming in that year for development.
Is part of your 3-month review that you just referred to in the previous question, looking at other opportunities, other efficiencies that potentially are out there in relation to offsite levies? I'm not going to use black magic.
Tanya will answer your question in a second. I just want to clarify, there's no 3-month review.
Oh, no, I said 3-month review. I meant.
Yeah,
I'm
sorry. And
apologize.
to Councillor Killick's previous point, the 3 months was about sort of relative prioritization of time and effort. In 3 months, please don't expect something to come back on this. This is probably year or years worth of work.
Yeah, no, and I just took it from the 3 months discussion. I'm assuming that there'd be a little bit longer time frame in relation to that. But I guess as part of your overall scan and review as the specialist now, are you looking at other opportunities that are potentially out there? I know we're limited in relation to the MGA and we're limited in relation to that, but I mean, we did have a pilot project. Is there other things out there that other communities are doing that we're not?
Some some communities run offsite levy programs and permanent area charge areas and things like that. So we're looking at everything and wondering how we might be able to kind of, I guess, share the burden a little more for upfronting.
All right, I look forward to whenever it comes.
Councillor Broadhead. Oh, you want to make the motion? Okay. Just making sure Councillor Jolly's hand is not up. She's good. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that bylaw 5/2024 be an amendment 13 to the offsite levy bylaw 30/2013 be read a first time.
Thank you for that, Councillor Broadhead. Anything on that?
Certainly, I guess I should apologize, but you use black magic. I intend no disrespect. It was simply to indicate that there's a lot that goes into calculating these and the complexity is certainly beyond me. But in any case, thank you for doing this. It is critical that this is done, Madam Mayor, to structure the cost of developing in the city of St. Albert, and I appreciate the collaborative effort that is being done with our development community to arrive at these numbers. And so thank you so much for the work that you do.
Awesome. I see no one else wanting to speak, so I'll call for the vote. Voting's closed? No? Pardon? Your screen's not showing up? Just put up your hand, yes or no. Okay, Councillor Romanski is an affirmative. We'll get that fixed for you, Shelley. Okay, Councillor Broadhead, second reading.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That bylaw 5/2024 be read a second time.
Awesome. Nothing further?
Nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Call for the vote. Councillor Romanski is a yes. That is passed unanimously. Who wants to give unanimous consent? Oh, look at all these people racing. Ken, you're first.
I just got quick fingers. That unanimous consent be given for consideration of third reading of bylaw 5/2024.
Call for the vote. Shelley's a yes.
Mine's blank, but you can put me as a yes.
That motion passes unanimously. Third reading, Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That bylaw 5/2024 be read a third time.
Call for the vote.
I'm blank again, so, but it's a yes.
Okay. And then there's one more motion, Councillor Broadhead, about the disbursements, I guess, the receipts.
Yep, very good done, Madam Mayor. That 4.98 million in the current offsite levy receipts held by the city be allocated and administered as indicated in 2023 offsite levy receipts reconciliation, consistent with approved council policy C-PNE 08, provided as an attachment to the March 19th, 2024 agenda report entitled Bylaw 5/2024 Offsite Levy Bylaw Amendment 13 and Annual Report.
Thank you for that. Call for the vote. What worked then? Okay. Well, it sounds like everybody's able to vote, so and that's done. So that passes unanimously. Awesome. Everybody's good to keep going for a bit longer? Okay. Emergent items, we had none. We are on to updates. Why don't we start with Councillor Jolly?
I can get them ready in about a minute.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Councillor Bermansky. You ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome.
Okay, so first update through the Mayor, Community Services Advisory Committee. I sat in on that one for Councillor Killick. And we did go through a presentation on community services social needs assessment from Connie in that department. So that was eye-opening for a lot of the committee. The one comment that was a feedback from the committee that it was some part of it was targeted feedback. So they would have liked to have seen it a more general feedback rather than targeted feedback, but it was a lot of good data that was provided. And social needs assessments are still needed in many areas in the community. And of course, we're doing good work there, but there's a lot of work to still be completed as well. We did a in-camera discussion on a community recognition, so that I won't present. And then we just went through the community events grants program, and they're doing sort of trying to make it more streamlined. For example, those groups that are, applying for permits for several different things, like whether it be the Kinsmen doing the rodeo and then doing another event, and streamline it so it makes it easy for the groups to, be clear in their process so they can plan ahead for the events and there's no delay in any of the events in the city. So I was very happy to hear about that as well, as was the group that were at the meeting. So that was a good meeting overall. The next one was the environmental committee, and we went through the Eileen bylaw. So we had a lot of good discussion with that one, idle-free bylaw. And actually the chair of the committee was on when that bylaw was created. So it's kind of interesting to hear how it came to be and what adjustments we may want in the future. There was a lot of mention about the idling in front of schools and how that can maybe be evaded. It's not necessarily buses, but we have a lot of citizens that drive kids to school now, and we have lineups of cars and traffic and whatever. So there was lots of good input on that. We had more discussion on contaminated sites policy in St. Albert, good feedback. The environmental committee, like they're an amazing group, like even the grants that are being provided, through the city for upgrades, they'll be the first on the lineup for that because they have ideas and plans for, always evolving their environmental commitment. So that was another great meeting. Last meeting, we have the Arts Development Advisory Committee, and there's been a new art policy draft put forward to the committee for consideration and feedback. And the last meeting, the old draft was eliminated. And then we had a presentation from CARFAC. So CARFAC is a society that decides, they actually make it simplified to decide how much an artist should be paid for their work and compensation and what values are in things, because a lot of times art can be not clear what its value is or having a guideline. So that will be implemented into the policy. So I think the new policy will be very clear of what the committee needs to do as representatives on the committee, which helps them. And we have guidelines and more clarity in the new policy, which will be coming to council further down the road. And Sisters of the Charity Grey Nuns mural that was removed because it was essentially in very, very bad condition. It was on the side of a building downtown, and that was the one that had to be removed. And the surface that it was on repaired as well. So that was funded in a prior vote by council. That piece of art was put in storage, and there was more research done on it, and it was determined that it was not being able to be repaired in a lot of ways. So there was a discussion with the artist to take back their property, which is, is their first choice. And we were fortunate that the artist did want to take the piece of art back. So it will be decommissioned back to the original artist. And that was unanimous at the committee as well. So again, a good and effective meeting. So that's all I have.
Awesome. Thanks. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Didn't have any assigned committee meetings since my last update. Although I will say I, along with many of my council colleagues, went to the business best breakfast last Thursday and the Alberta Munis Spring Caucus. And I have to say that I thought it was a great conference. The opportunity to have a bear pit session with the ministers, and a number of them showed up. And I thought we had a great conversation. Then to hear the premier speak as eloquently as she always does about the things, whether you agree with her or not, she's certainly a proficient public speaker, and she did a good job, and it was interesting to see her engage. The one thing that I liked about the conference was the mid-sized municipalities roundtable breakout. I thought that was unique and certainly informative this time around.
Cool. Yeah, we used to do that years ago, but they stopped, and now they
Stopped
brought
doing
it back.
okay.
Yeah. And I would say the premier was quite generous with her time when answering questions and allowing a bit of a back and forth. I thought was really good. Yeah. Councillor Jolly, you ready to go?
I am, thank you. I'm deputy mayor right now, so my calendar is a little bit more crowded than usual. So the Youth Advisory Committee had a meeting, and they did make a recommendation regarding the volunteer program. I wasn't at agenda committee, but I assume that's going to be coming up pretty quick, kind of looking at their recommendation. Homeland Housing, the meeting is actually coming up in 2 days. I'll be chairing that meeting, and we are having a presentation on our audited financials. So preliminary report looks good. Also attended the Intercity Forum on Social Policy. A few presentations, updates. The big item from that meeting is just electing the new chair and other positions. So that was completed, and that group we'll be meeting again. I think they're trying to meet. Oh gosh, they updated it so it's meeting a little bit more often than they have, and there's definitely an interest to meet in person as well. So that's what we'll be looking at going forward.
Awesome. Councillor Hughes.
Well, I know we've all been waiting to hear about my waste reduction committee meeting update, and the good news is it's here. We only get it a few times a year. So here's the excitement here. We had somebody come and present to us about, they're doing a cement carbon capture carbon capture facility that's coming to Edmonton. And so just, I know this, but cement is the second most used product in the world, second only to water. So it's a lot. But apparently when it dries, it forms a lot of carbon dioxide, and so now they're trying to do this carbon capture. So I don't know if you know what carbon capture actually consists of, but I learned this. So if you haven't, just bear with me. But what you do is, in the process of making it, they suck out all the carbon dioxide and they put it in a giant tube, and it goes 2.5 kilometers down into the earth. And then it mixes with a substance called brine. And then over the course of the next 300 to 1,000 years, it will become rock. And that is what carbon capture is. So did not know that. The cost to doing this, because it is a little expensive to shove things 2.5 kilometers down into the ground to mix with brine, the expected cost will be about 30% higher on cement than what people are currently paying. And they're hoping that one of the major consumers of cement is obviously municipalities. And it will, if you do it in your home, they're estimating it to be about a 1 to 2% increase to the overall cost, which is still going to be about $10,000 if you look at an average 500,000 at home to do it. So that's coming to Edmonton. It's coming, I call it Mount Trashmore, but you know, this off 170th Street, there's a giant pile of what used to be garbage. And then on the other side, there's a bunch of rubble of cement, and that's where that facility is coming for 2026. But what's also relevant is that apparently you can completely recycle cement and reuse it. So when we have to do any type of taking things down as a 2026, they are more than happy to take our product from us and then resell it. So it'd just be an avenue for us to potentially dispose of something and potentially at no cost. So just want to let you know that. I also got to tour the actual facility there, and we got to see how all the garbage is sorted and processed. And part of it, they keep mashing it up until it becomes fluff. And then they're going to be using that in part to make it with cement. So that's also one of the things that they're doing on that. And the other thing was that, just FYI, do not put lithium batteries, well, especially if you're in Edmonton, into the facility, because they go through this whole, they got things burning, they got 95 different tracks of garbage going through. It's quite fascinating just to sit there and watch it, like mesmerized. But if lithium batteries get into the heat element, the thing goes onto fire. So they are very concerned about that. Also, if you have small pieces of aircraft, do not put it into your garbage. They did catch that as well, and that's a big issue of jamming it up. So that was one of the issues they had on that. Yeah, they're like, this was a piece of an aircraft. It does not fold down. So that's the waste, because I know we've been waiting. Next one isn't till June, so they just keep on counting down those sleeps. The second element we had was the audit committee. So I don't know, I'm going to kind of steal a little bit of thunder here, but so sorry, Councillor McKay. But this was we came up with a decision. We've come forward with the final decision of who we're going to bring forward for the recommendation. I think that the
Which
consensus
recommendation is that?
for who we're doing for the cybersecurity.
Just for clarification.
Yes, and just so we're clear, we're not doing an audit because we think there's a concern with cybersecurity, but rather because from a risk analysis point of view, if there is an issue, it's highest potential risk. And so we are doing this to be proactive to ensure that there isn't a problem with cybersecurity. And while we were doing this entire evaluation, the timing could not have been more clear how important it is to do it, and that Hamilton actually had a ransomware attack and was completely shut down. So if you're ever like, should we do this, or what is the value of this audit? Huge value, because we're hopefully going to be identifying any weaknesses and address them before somebody actually does an attack to us. And so this is where we are going to double check to make sure that all our procedures are as strong as possible. And then from there, if we need to find anything, we will solve it. And again, so this is being very proactive. So we came up with it. It took us at least 40 hours of work from the committee members to actually come forward with it. And then we brought it forward for recommendation, and it was approved by the committee was it last week? It feels like it was longer, but about a week and a half ago. So I'm really pleased to see it's going to go forward. We'll have something later on this year. It was a very collaborative process with both staff, and we had IT on hand. And I just want to recognize everybody who was in that decision-making committee that put in those hours and put in the overtime. And it was a very positive process. It was not at all like an us them. It was all collaborative of trying to figure out how we can come to the best decision. And I do believe that what was finally decided upon, every member of that committee would have recommended that independently as well. So, and in this process, there's been tons of learnings that we will be taking forward as we move forward for any future proposals that will have been taken to heart, and will be taken to just make sure that we improve this process and make sure that in every part of the procedure it's just a stronger process for everybody. We weren't expecting to get 26. It was the most, or 27. It was the most RPs that the city's ever received for any one audit, and we got to do it. So that's it. All right. So a few more sleeps, and then we'll hear some more about waste.
Awesome. Councillor McKay.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for providing an update in relation to our internal audit. So I can park that one. put it in the garbage can for June.
Nothing to
Just going back to my EMRB committee. So it was the Metropolitan Regional Servicing Plan meeting, and primarily the entire meeting was basically set up to look at the 5-year review and update and take it back to the EMRB board as to what we think the future of that committee is, if there is a future in that committee. There's been a lot of good work in relation to the first 2 areas around waste. So you thought you were gone, and some of the work around stormwater. But there's some maybe feedback is the best way to describe it in relation to what is the ongoing kind of, should we be looking at the other items that are in relation to what the task force had initially identified, and that's particularly around fire, EMS, emergency management, those service areas. So we're going actually this Thursday, we're on the agenda for the entire EMRB committee of the whole, and there'll be further discussion in relation to that. Certainly a lot of concern as it ties into, don't know where that's from. Is that you? I don't know where that I guess there was some conversation particularly around the fact that EMRB didn't receive the extra $1 million that it was asking for from the provincial government. So I think that certainly funding is a concern in relation to that. And so potentially there'll be more discussion, and we'll finally find out what's going to happen in relation to if the committee even continues moving forward. I had my policing committee last Tuesday, and really nothing of just kind of regular committee business. It was interesting, and maybe you guys read it in the Gazette, but one of the stings that the RCMP did was they put undercover officers in Walmart and Superstore, and they I guess it was well warranted, because I mean they ended up making several arrests, recovering like $1,100 worth of stolen property, and no, they didn't catch it. And so I think there was some really good proactive work going on in relation to that. It was identified by one of their members, and they said that this is something that we should do, and obviously it reaped the rewards. There is a resolution, and I think I put it on your desk, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
So you didn't see it.
For
There
the
is a
Alberta Police
resolution.
Governance?
Yeah, there is a resolution from our committee that is going to the Alberta Association of Police Governance in early May in relation to what we were talking about around the public complaints director position and some of the feedback that the province is seeking in relation to changing the structure and the role, and maybe even the responsibilities as it rolls out, and may impact our policing committee. So we put the resolution in. I didn't share it with all of council. I can if you're interested. And I think, Madam Mayor, I don't know if you were going to touch base on it, but you've been invited to go to attend Lethbridge, and I think some of the council members are one day in advance of the policing committee to talk about some issues that are impacting our communities. I think Lethbridge is somewhat unique in the sense of it, or maybe Red Deer and Lethbridge are a little bit different than what we are, but they're facing some community challenges in relation to some disorder, and they thought it of value to take advantage of everybody coming down to Lethbridge and having a wholesome discussion, and they've even offered everybody a chance to present what some of our successes or some of our challenges are. So
is anyone from the police committee?
Yes, well, I think right now, I'm not sure who's all going down, but for sure the chair is going down.
Okay.
And they're trying to identify the 2 new members of the policing committee, but it just depends on their time availability.
Right, but you forwarded that invite to them?
I haven't, I was going to forward it through Carrie, because I just thought that would be more appropriate.
Okay.
Carrie's
Yeah.
our legislature officer. So. And then yesterday, big announcement with the provincial government around the $50 million grant that Aero Utilities received. So Mayor Herron was there, as was about 9 or 10 other mayors in the region, as well as Minister Dreeshen and Minister Newdorf. And basically it was just a kind of a announcement, and the budget hasn't been approved yet in the legislature, so there was no handing over the check. But it was actually a really good event, other than I had a small slip in my tongue as I was the MC and I said somebody's name wrong, so anyway.
Not just somebody, the Minister of Transportation.
Yeah, I sort of had a slip at the tongue. Anyways, I apologize. He accepted my apology.
It's all good.
It's all good. It was actually a really a beautiful day. I'm so happy we did it yesterday and not today, because but it was a big event, and I've been really tied up with obviously with some of the changes we've done in the structure and reporting. We are I'm going to all of the subcommittee meetings, so I'm fairly consumed in relation to my time relating to Aero Utilities. So I'm trying desperately to remember if I had anything else. I don't think so.
All right. Good. Councillor Killick.
I'll wrap it up pretty quick. Just say thank you to Councillor Romansky for attending CSAC for me while I was away, and her update to council today. Nothing more to add to that. For Edmonton Salutes on February 23rd, I also was not able to attend that meeting, but based on the minutes, I spoke to them before and told them I would not be attending, and it was a very light agenda. So there was no problem there, but key things that came out of that is that Morinville is officially joining Edmonton Salutes, so that's good. We did have a donor appreciation day scheduled for the Family Resource Center out at the base. Unfortunately, that was just recently canceled. That was scheduled for the 21st, but for some unforeseen circumstances, that was just canceled in the last day or two. And we have set the date for the next large fundraiser, which is the Yellow Ribbon Gala event, and that is set for May 11th. So those were the key highlights from the minutes of Edmonton Salutes, and our next meeting is coming up this week.
Cool. All right, we are on to information requests, notice of motions, and council and announcements. Mike, I know you have a notice of motion, and you also had some questions about busing, so I'll start with you. You can do notice of motion first, or whatever order you want.
I do the notice of motion first.
Sure.
That's been submitted through the system, that council policy C-CC-16 meeting through electronic communications be amended to add a section stating that councillors shall make every effort to attend council meetings in person and only attend council meetings by electronic communications due to unforeseen, extenuating, or extraordinary circumstances.
All right.
And the question for Mr. Fletcher was due to some questions raised from residents of in Riverside and a resident in Jensen Lakes. I wondered if you could give us an update on bus delivery and eventual turn up of schedule. What would be the timing of that that we could share with residents?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor, and I will ask our Director of Public Operations, Tim Saunders, to respond. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Killick, thank you for the question. So we are planning for implementation of our Jensen Lakes and Riverside transit service beginning in fall of this year. It's tentatively scheduled for August 25th, which is the fall sign-up period, and that's when we transition to our fall scheduling for school service. A little bit of additional clarity is the service for Jensen Lakes is going to be a loop through Jensen Lakes Boulevard down to Jensen Lakes Gate and then Villeneuve back to St. Albert Trail down to our St. Albert Center Exchange. And the Riverside is going to be a loop around Riverside at, it's going to be McKinney down to Rosegate, across Rankin, and back up through Riverside, and then back to St. Albert Center. At implementation, it's planned for peak period local, and that is standard for implementation of new routing. And then we'll be able to monitor ridership and scale up from that point.
Thank you, Tim. That's great. I'm sure residents will be very excited about not only the delivery of service, but the timing of it just in time for back to school. That's great. Thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Awesome. Is that kind of because we advanced the purchase of some of the buses? Yeah. Okay. Part of it. I also, I had a notice of motion. Or no, it was an IR, sorry. About recycling. So what would it take to change our solid waste bylaw to acquire multifamily residential to provide organics and recycling, much like what the city of Leduc has just done? And then what bylaw changes would be required to also force source separation from the ICI sector? So that is my IR. Did anyone else have anything? IRs or notice motions? So did I catch her? Okay. Anyone have any questions they want to ask publicly before we move on? Councillor Jolly, you're good? Okay. Then the next thing on our agenda is in camera. So we're going to do our dialogue with Bill, and then we'll let him go home and we'll do the evaluation. Okay, so I need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Hughes.
Council move in camera and have a confidential dialogue with its CAO in pursuant to sections 24(1)(a) of FOIP.
Call for the vote. And that motion passes unanimously, so we will reconvene in council lounge.